July 7, 2020 meeting of the Marion County School Board is called to order. Ms. Thor, can you give us our board motto?
Absolutely. We are the Marion County Leadership Team. If we choose one word to describe us, it would be student-centered, because student success is our mission. When we come together to work, we are efficient, effective, and relevant. Our three most important characteristics are dedicated, diverse, and dynamic. To work well together, we must demonstrate respect, confront reality and clarify expectations, and get better. We do not accept excuses. We will not accept mediocrity. We will always put students first. We will leave a legacy of success.
Thank you. I would like to ask members of the audience to please remove their hats. For the courtesy of those listening to the meeting, I am requesting everyone in the audience to please turn off your electronic devices or put them on vibrate. Later in the meeting, up to 30 minutes will be provided for individuals to address the board on matters concerning the operation of the Marion County school system or the school board only. Presentations to the board are limited to 5 minutes and are televised. If you wish to address the board regarding a regular agenda item or matters on which the board customarily takes action, you must first complete a peach form located on the table in the hallway. If you wish to address the board regarding a public hearing or a student discipline matter, please complete a lime green form. These forms must be fully completed and received by the board secretary no later than 1:10 p.m. The procedures applicable for each are on a separate sheet. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mrs. Nancy Stacy, District 1. Here. Mrs. Beth McCall, District 2.
Here.
Mrs. Kelly King, District 5. Here. Mrs. Nancy Thrower, District 4.
Here.
Mr. Eric Cummings, District 3.
Here.
Ms. Dr. Diane Gullett, Superintendent.
Here.
Ms. Suzanne Green, School Board Attorney.
Here.
Thank you. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll now ask the school board's attorney to explain the rules governing persons who wish to address the school board today.
In compliance with Section 286.0114 Florida statutes, the school board has adopted uniform procedures for public speakers who wish to speak at today's meeting, either regarding one of today's agenda items or a matter relating to the operations of the school district. These procedures will ensure the public has a reasonable opportunity to be heard on school board and school district matters. A written summary of these procedures is available from the table in the hallway. Public speaker forms are also located on the same table. The completed forms are due to the school board secretary no later than 1:10 p.m. Today's speakers will be called prior to the business portion of the school board's meeting and the order of receipt by the school board's secretary. Before you begin speaking, please state your full name and address for the record and spell your last name. Each speaker will have 5 minutes of time. However, if there are more than 5 persons who wish to speak, the board may seek consensus to limit each speaker's time to 3 minutes. When the speaker has 1 minute remaining, the speaker will receive a visual notice to complete his or her comments. Speakers may not yield their time to others. Speakers and meeting attendees are expected to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. Therefore, verbal attacks and profanity are strictly prohibited. Pursuant to the procedures for public comments, item 6, speakers are not to identify specific individuals other than themselves or their child unless the statement is provided 24 hours in advance. If there are matters dealing with student discipline to include expulsions, they will be scheduled at the conclusion of the televised portion of this meeting. Parents may address the board regarding a discipline matter at that time. To ensure student privacy, only a parent or guardian may use a student's first or last name. Identifying reference to or identification of other students and or their families is strictly prohibited. Thank you.
Secretary, how many?
We have 9.
We have 9. Board members, we have 9 members. What I do want to do is hold off. If all of these speakers are in relation to school reopening, I want to hold off all their comments until after the presentation, which is item 4.5. You guys in agreement? Okay. All right. So, may I have a motion to rescind resolution number 20-02, authorizing use of employee accrued sick leave and uncompensated leave for specified reasons directly related to COVID-19 pandemic?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. McCall,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Stacy. Any discussion? All in favor signify by aye. Aye. May I have a motion to approve the 2020 Summer School Recovery Program Staffing Plan?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Throer,
Second.
seconded by Ms. McCall. Any discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
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 May I have a motion to approve all personnel items as listed in the board packet for the 2020-2021 fiscal year? Moved by Ms. King,
Second.
seconded by Ms. McCall. Any discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
May I have a motion to approve special leave for election workers? Leave is for 6 hours on July 29th, 8 hours on August 18th, 8 hours on November 3rd, and 3 hours on a date to be determined by supervisor elections. This is to fulfill the governor's executive order 20-149 requesting election workers. Moved by Ms. King, seconded by Ms. Thor. Any discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
May I have a motion to approve the reopening school task force recommendation?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. McCall, seconded by Ms. King. Mr. Mark Villanello, Deputy Superintendent, I understand you have a PowerPoint presentation you would like to share with the board.
Good afternoon, Reverend Cummings,
Good
Dr.
afternoon.
Gullett, and school board members. Thank you, Kevin. So Dr. Gullett, a few weeks ago, asked me to be the chair of our Reopening Schools Task Force. And so today, on behalf of
We need everybody to remove their hats or leave the room. Please.
What now?
Need everybody to remove their hats or leave the room.
Why?
We just need you to remove the hats, sir. Thank you. We appreciate you.
I don't understand why. What's offensive about my hat? I took it off for the pledge, I'll take it off for prayer, but
That's just a rule of the board. Mr. McFadden, ask Mr. McFadden to come in.
you asked, you didn't demand, sir.
I'm asking you, can you please remove your
You're
hat?
right, you're asking.
It's a board policy that you would take the hat off.
You're still asking.
I'm not gonna demand you. You can either leave the room or take your hat off, sir.
You're asking me to remove my hat, I'm refusing. I'm saying.
Mr.
no, thank
McFadden.
you. You're asking, demand it and I'll take it off. Dang. Demand it, I take it off, Mr. Bull. Dang. Well, you're gonna no, I'm asking you to take it off. Take it off, please. You're asking.
Sir, take your hat off.
Now you're demanding. So in the United States, we don't have the freedom to wear a hat in a public meeting? Dang. Let me talk. This is wrong. I live in the United States. A lot of people have died for freedom. And you're gonna tell somebody they can't be in a public meeting because of a hat. Because of a hat, sir. Next thing you're gonna say, no one can go to the school or come to this meeting without a mask.
Thank you, Mr. Villanello. Continue, please.
Reverend Cummings, thank you. And so as chair of the task force, on behalf of several hundred individuals that have worked very hard over the past 3 or 4 weeks on this, I am pleased and proud to share with the board and our community the recommendations of our task force. And I'd like to start off and be really clear what Dr. Gullett's task was for me and for those who served on the committee. The what was to ensure that we could open our school year successfully and safely when we open in August. And as we built this plan throughout the month of June, we didn't know what's going to happen in August. So we had to provide options, we had to be flexible, and we had to present to the board a variety of options so that regardless of where we stand as a community, as in the state, we're ready to go with a variety of options. So the why on this is also very important. Keeping our students safe, keeping our employees safe, successfully opening our school year is important. We have to be able to check that box. But we have to remember why all of that is important. And we have to get back to normalcy as soon as we can. We have to get back so that our students have the ability to work toward proficiency. They have to work toward academic achievement. We have to make sure that our students are provided that social and emotional foundation, that we're working toward relevancy for all of our students, working toward the 3 E's so that the students understand what's next for them, providing them that foundation so that whatever they decide to do next, we've successfully prepared them to do. So that is the why. I think it's very important that we spend a moment and talk through the process, the how that we went about getting the recommendations for you today. We divided up into 4 different subcommittees, and you see it up on the screen. We had an instructional delivery, we had a second interruption, we had a health and safety, and we had a scheduling subcommittee. Now, very important for the community and our school board to recognize that this plan that you see before you today was not built in isolation. It was not built in any silos. We had a collective team of 130 different individuals who served on these 4 subcommittees, ranging from administrators, ranging from district staff, our psychological services, our social work services. We had community members, we had parents, we had students, we had union presidents on this. We brought together the very best minds, and over the course of 2-3 weeks, we worked together collectively to say, how can we address these 4 areas and come for the board and recommend, here's how Marion County schools can open up. So that was the how. It was a collective effort to develop this plan that you see before you today. So how we're going to do this today, we have the 4 subcommittees. We're going to ask that each of our 4 chairs for the subcommittees, that they come in and they present in greater detail the rationale and the work that the committee created. And then that way you all can certainly have an understanding of what's in the plan and then be able to ask questions of what's in the plan. But before I bring in Mr. Whitehouse to talk about the scheduling, what I'd like to do is present to the board and present to our community an overview, a high-level overview, so you can get the bigger picture of what we'll be talking about, and then we'll get into the details of what we'll be talking about. So what you're going to hear today is 2 main options. We're going to talk through 2 main options. There'll be a third option that has always existed, but what we're going to focus on today is 2 main options. One will be reopening our schools in a very traditional sense, keeping in mind the guidelines of the health department and the CDC. So what does that mean with social distancing? So we'll talk through what our school buses look like, what our cafeterias should look like, what between the hallways will look like. We'll talk through how can we provide social distancing in our school environment. So that will be one of the things that you'll hear from the traditional opening that we have, bringing everybody back in brick and mortar. The other thing you're going to hear today is if a parent says, I'm not comfortable returning in that environment, then we want to give our parents options. So we're going to create something called MCPS Online, and that is going to be a different version of what we experienced in the spring through distance learning. It's going to be an upgraded model. We had lessons learned for what took place in the spring. So we're going to spend time walking you through what MCPS Online will look like, and there will be different expectations. The bar will be raised from what we experienced in the spring to what we're going to offer in the fall if a parent chooses that particular option. We're going to talk about survey deadlines, and so that our community members, our parents, our students will have an opportunity to say, which of these 2 options would I like to select? We're going to walk you through our website that will show parents where they can log in, how they can learn more about this, and how they can fill out the survey. We're also going to talk about our instruction. And you'll hear from Mr. McAteer and you'll hear from Mrs. Beck. We know we have significant challenges. We know that some of our students, many of our students, learning wasn't optimal in the third 9 weeks. And they're going to come back with us here very soon in August in an environment sitting in classrooms with students who did very well. So how does the teacher assess learning, where the students begin? How do they group their students? How do they differentiate instruction when you have one student who had very little learning taking place in the 9 weeks through no fault of their own, sitting in the same room with the student that had a great deal of learning taking place? So we'll talk about that. And finally, our subcommittee spent much time thinking through a second interruption. We know that the possibility does exist that sometime in the school year, we may have to go back into a situation where brick and mortar learning may not be allowed. So in that case that happens, we have to, again, lessons learned from what took place in the spring. How can we provide an upgraded service delivery model, an instructional delivery model for if that circumstance if that takes place? So that is the high-level overview. You'll hear from each one of our subcommittees, and then we'll be happy to entertain questions at the end. So with that being said, I'm going to ask Mr. Whitehouse to please enter the room, and we will start with the scheduling committee.
Thank you, Mr.
And there's Mr. Whitehouse.
All right, good afternoon, board members. Dr. Goett. I'm here to share the recommendations of the scheduling committee that were made through several weeks of hard work from a dedicated group that worked to put together what was not an easy task for us to really think through a scheduling in very challenging times and scheduling that would meet the needs of all of our diverse learners. So I do want to give a big thank you to Ms. McCall. She worked with our group on the scheduling committee. This was quite a challenge for us to be able to work through, but we feel comfortable and confident in what we're going to share today as our recommendations from the scheduling group. So you'll see before you on the PowerPoint, this is part of a survey that we sent out to our parents in June. As you may recall, we sent out and asked for all parents to give us feedback on what they were looking for, what they were comfortable with in the fall as we come back. And we asked a number of questions, and this one in particular really resonated with the scheduling group because it made us really stop and think that we've got to come up with really creative solutions. As you'll see on this PowerPoint here, the question is, if given the choice, when would you send your child back to school for face-to-face learning? At the time when we sent the survey out, the governor had not made his statement that schools need to reopen in August, so we were exploring the option of September. But the January and the I don't plan to return at all this school year obviously concerned us because that's a large percentage of our students in Marion County that were not comfortable returning for at least the first semester of school. And we needed to make sure that we provide an option for them that would allow them to continue to be successful with instruction and learning so that we are not allowing our students to fall behind and increasing the achievement gap within our students. So we took this survey into consideration, and ultimately we wanted to come up with options that would meet the needs of all those students, including the ones that were not comfortable returning, but also making sure that we had a way for our students to stay connected with their current registered school, and that was a priority for our group. The next piece on here, we also sent out a survey to our teachers and staff. We asked the principals in June before staff left to survey all of their staff on a number of questions. We also surveyed some key staff that work in and around our schools on a daily basis, including our bus drivers, cafeteria workers, custodians. And two of the things that we really highlighted on with the scheduling group with the teachers, because we knew that there were probably going to be some changes with how we approach instruction. We were going to have to be very creative in the fall when we return. So we really wanted to find out from our teachers what their comfort level was with different types of instruction, new ways of teaching. We couldn't just simply return to the way that we've always done things. There had to be a new approach. And so we wanted to really find out, to help us drive our decision-making during the summer, what was it that they were comfortable doing. So you'll see on here, we asked them two questions that really spoke to that. One was, when we return face-to-face in August or September at the time, we didn't know, would you be comfortable teaching a distance learning option? Meaning, if students did not all return back to school, would you feel comfortable teaching virtually from your classroom? So again, our expectation for them was that all teachers would return in August. We knew that face-to-face was in some way, shape, or form going to return, at least we hoped it at that time. And so the first question we had asked them was, are you planning to return in August? Because we needed to know that very quickly from all of our staff. And the next question being, do you feel comfortable teaching distance learning? And you'll see on there that the vast majority of our teachers said that they felt comfortable, if that was an option for them, that they could teach some online classes. The second question that we asked them, would you be willing to teach more than one way? What do we mean by that? So if you had children that were teaching remotely and children that were coming to school in brick and mortar, would you feel comfortable with part of your day being devoted to teaching students in front of you in a face-to-face setting? And then would you also be comfortable switching gears at some point during the day and then teaching a distance learning or remote learning option for your students? And you'll see again, obviously we had some, I'm not sure, because they weren't sure what that would look like, but the vast majority of our teachers that responded said that yes, I would feel comfortable teaching in multiple modalities throughout the day. And what that would look like, obviously we were not clear, but that really helped to drive our decision-making with the scheduling committee, because we knew we had teachers who were comfortable with different ways of approaching instruction, and we knew that we were going to have to be very creative in what we did. Moving on to the next slide. So our committee is recommending two options, and if you saw the emergency order that was issued yesterday by Commissioner Corcoran, what he requested in that emergency order really aligns nicely with what we are proposing here in our scheduling option. So the governor already stated a while back that he wanted schools opened at full capacity in August. Commissioner Corcoran reemphasized that in that emergency order, that he wanted schools open at least 5 days a week for students and parents that wanted their children on campus 5 days a week, but also taking into consideration that we have families that have differing needs and differing concerns with what may be happening at their home, with family life, with personal concerns with their children or with themselves, and we needed to make sure that we were cognizant of that and provided an opportunity for them to continue their instruction in a rigorous way that was going to keep them at the same pace with those who were attending our schools in brick and mortar. And so that was very clear to us. I will note that it was mentioned in that webinar yesterday that we will have to submit a plan to the Department of Education that will spell out exactly what our plans are for students returning. We do have to make sure that we meet certain assurances in order to get approval for our plan for returning to school in August. And once the Department of Education signs off on our plan, that makes us eligible then for the full FTE funding for the year. So listening to, while the template for those assurances has not been released by the Department of Education yet, we felt comfortable listening to them talk through yesterday that we will meet those assurances with these two options that we're going to present today. So you'll see before you, there's two options there, traditional and MCPS online, which is what we have rebranded a new and improved version of distance learning. Marion Virtual and eMarion are longstanding traditions in Marion County. They are still available as a pathway for families that so choose, as are charter schools, private schools, and a number of other options that have been available for a long time. But we wanted to make sure for our students that typically came to our public schools on a daily basis that we had solid choices that would meet the needs of all of our students instructionally, but also meeting their needs through health and safety. So the plan that we have for you when I go through this, you're going to see that not only are we going to address the health and safety, we're also going to make sure that our scheduling options support the instructional delivery model, which is going to be very important, that you'll hear from Mr. McAteer and Ms. Beck later, but also that we are preparing for a potential second interruption, which could be localized or could be more widespread between schools, because we're going to have teachers who are already ingrained and working through an online teaching format, that we will be much better prepared to roll into that as a full school or within a grade level or however that ends up. So you'll note on the traditional, first thing on there, we are going to be open 5 days a week. So parents who select the traditional model will be able to come to school 5 days a week. There's not an A day, B day. It's every single day of the week. For a full school day, you will be attending school in a traditional format at your registered school that you've already been approved to attend for the coming school year. You're going to follow a typical school day schedule, so students would have the normal, if you're at a secondary school, 6-period day. At the elementary school, again, following what a traditional K through 5 learning environment would look like, with a full bevy of options for those students in terms of electives that we would typically see in a traditional school setting, but with some definite health and safety guidelines in place to make sure that we're providing a safe and healthy place for our students to return to school, and make sure that we are responsibly reopening our schools to the public. And I will talk through some of those as we go forward. What we'll probably see with our traditional setting, once we get through this, is that we may end up with some lower classes, which is good, because if students are selecting the MCPS online, that may reduce the enrollment of brick and mortar, which would allow us to then continue to add more health and safety guidelines, because we would be reducing even further the number of students within those classrooms. But we will know that more once we actually get that information back from the parents as to what their choice is. The other option that we are presenting is MCPS Online, and it's important to note that we took a lot of the feedback that we got from teachers and from parents from our distance learning in the spring, and we took a lot of the things that were successful, that they liked, but we also improved on a lot of the things that we knew we needed to improve on to make this a successful option for our students. We want to make sure that whether you are taking school in front of us in a brick and mortar classroom, or whether you are taking school remotely from your computer at home, that you are getting the same high quality education from our teachers and from our schools, regardless of which of those two modalities you choose. And so that's very important. So you will note, one, most importantly, you're going to remain enrolled at your current school. And that's important for Marion County because we are a choice district. We have a lot of magnet options for our families. So if you are a parent that has registered your child at Madison Street, which is a purely magnet school for the upcoming year, and you elect to do MCPS online, you're not going to be taught through what would have been your base school. You will continue as a student at Madison Street Elementary School, and that applies for all of our magnet programs. You will be taught by teachers at that registered school, and when and if you decide you're ready to make that transition back to a brick and mortar classroom, you would obviously retain that seat and be able to work right back in as if you had never left. You'll also notice that we are going to make sure that in this option, you are following a typical bell schedule. So it's not a, here's some assignments, do it when you want to. It's going to be, if school starts at 9 and ends at 3, you are expected to be at your computer ready to work at 9 o'clock, just like students are expected to be in their seats in the brick and mortar setting, ready to learn. And so teachers are going to be assigned to groups of students through the online environment. The expectation is you will be there ready to learn. The teachers will be there ready to teach, to check in. Attendance will be taken each class period or each day, depending on the setting that you're in. And there will be an expectation for instruction and facilitation of learning by the teachers in this option. So there will be some face-to-face interaction, whether through Microsoft Teams, whether through Zoom. We'll talk through that as we continue through this afternoon, but the expectation is that they will follow a typical bell schedule with attendance taken during the normal school day, and that teachers will be available to those students during the normal school day. One caveat I will note is on the MCPS Online, there will be, especially at the secondary level, a reduction in the amount of electives that they can choose from. Most of that has to do with there are only some electives that are completely conducive to an online learning environment. For instance, it's very difficult to teach band when nobody is actually in front of you and we're all playing instruments from a distance. So we're really going to think through those on an individual school-by-school basis. What electives can we feasibly offer and teach remotely to our students and still give them the same high-quality instruction that they would receive if those students were directly in front of them. So we will work through those on a case-by-case basis. Continuing on, so with the traditional options, some other things that we consider with scheduling. And please keep in mind that as we talk through each of these traditional models, we have recommendations that we're going to make to the principals, but at the end of the day, it's going to be very unique by campus. And a lot of that is going to depend on the size of the school, the layout of the school, the enrollment numbers of the school, how many students are there versus attending online. So no two schools is going to look exactly alike in how they handle each of these bullet points that we work through, but we have some general guidelines that we're going to provide to make sure that we are meeting for our students. So the first deals with arrival and dismissal. So we are certainly recommending a staggering of arrival and dismissal at our schools to the extent feasible. So for instance, at an elementary school, whereas typically we would just say, please arrive sometime between 7 and 7:45, it may be much more structured, where we say, if you are in grades 4 and 5, please arrive between 7 and 7:15, or perhaps if you are alphabet A through C, however the school decides to choose, and we'll work through that on a case-by-case basis. But staggering the arrival of our classrooms and also making sure that our classrooms are open earlier, especially at the secondary level, so that we don't have large congregations of students out in the courtyard meandering around before school starts, but we're able to get those students as quickly as we can after arrival into their classrooms. We're also going to look at staggering dismissal of our schools, and we know that this is going to run into some challenges for us, especially with transportation, with busing. We've got to really work through that because we know as it is now, sometimes our buses arrive not too far before the end of the teacher workday. We've already started conversations with Mr. Avery with the MEA. We will continue those conversations to make sure that we are being fair to our teachers in how we approach this, but we certainly need to look at the staggering of dismissals, which may be we release car riders first and then bus riders after we've been able to get most of the car riders cleared, or vice versa. Maybe we release the first few buses that have arrived right on time, and then the next few we release to stagger, but we'll work through that on a school-by-school basis. Student movement, we're really going to talk about in two different ways, because if you've been in elementary and secondary schools, obviously the amount of student movement varies greatly between those two. So we're going to think about elementary school movement as very limited. So by that we mean that for the most part, students will stay within one classroom. So if you think of a typical upper elementary classroom where you may have team teachers, you may have as a 5th grade student 2 teachers, one teacher teaching ELA and social studies, the other one teaching math and science. Whereas in the past, we would have switched the students between the teachers' classrooms. We're going to recommend the opposite for now, that we actually switch the teachers between the classrooms, not the students. The reason being is because we want to keep those students together as a group, but also within the same environment. And the more environments that we expose the students to, obviously, the greater risk that we then pose for our students. So we will look at that on a case-by-case basis with our classrooms and what that will look like at each school. We will also have to look at staggering recess. Obviously, we cannot release 15 classrooms to go outside and run and play as we normally would. We would really have to think through that at each school. Some schools, perhaps some students are going to be recessing inside and some are outside and they flip-flop, but we will talk through that on a case-by-case basis. At the secondary school, obviously, we can't just keep students in one place and move teachers because there are way too many different types of classes that our students take. They do not traditionally follow within a cohort, especially at the high school level. You could have students taking the same English class, but they may be taking 4 different math classes, and they may be taking 15 different electives. And we know that's not feasible. It's also not fair to expect a chemistry teacher to be able to teach chemistry in an English teacher's classroom. So we are still at the secondary going to recommend for middle and high school students that we do have a traditional transition between classrooms with students moving from place to place, obviously following social distancing guidelines. And I know that the Health and Safety Committee will get into that more, but we will certainly look at traffic flow patterns at each of the school, how we can reduce crowding of students through traffic flow through hallways and in typically crowded areas like courtyards. And also making sure that we increase our adult monitoring outside, that we can keep the flow of traffic moving and not allowing students to stop and congest. Breakfast and lunch obviously is going to have to change as well. Typically, we would have large groups of students gathering in the cafeteria to eat, and we know that following social distancing guidelines, that's not going to be possible. So we are recommending, to the extent possible, doing grab-and-go breakfasts and lunches for our students. It's a little bit easier for the breakfast side because as students are unloading from the buses and cars, we can get them a grab-and-go meal and they can take it right into the classroom with them at the beginning of the day. As most of them tend to arrive right about the start of school anyways, that's not going to be a huge hurdle for us to overcome. We will certainly have to look, though, at the lunch setting. And so what we will do is we will look at as many classrooms as we can on a rotational basis, eating within their classrooms, smaller numbers of students eating in the cafeteria, obviously having to remove potentially some furniture and chairs, especially at the secondary level, to make sure that if there's 500 seats in the cafeteria in the middle school and we let them go, they're all going to sit in those 500 seats. So we're going to have to definitely make sure that we are cautious in what that looks like and providing those options, making sure that we utilize outdoor eating spaces to the extent possible at each of our schools. As we know, being outside certainly provides for a safer environment for those students. And again, we understand that this is going to present some potential concerns with our teachers. We've begun conversations with Mr. Avery and the MEA, and we'll continue those conversations to make sure that we are taking care of our teachers as well as our students through this time period. We've also talked with the cafeteria staff, and Ms. Johnson has been fantastic in working through a lot of these challenges, looking at increasing the number of cafeteria lines that we have to speed up the flow within our secondary schools, being able to do some meal delivery services where possible, and also being able to do hands-free lunch payment. So instead of students all having to punch their code in, being able to use barcode scanners for students on their student ID that would allow us to speed up the lines and obviously reduce the touch points. With extracurricular and athletics at traditional schools, we do still intend to recommend the inclusion of extracurricular activities and athletics on a scaled-down basis. And so what we would recommend is that with athletics, we look at capacity limits within our athletic facilities. As you are all well aware, we have blue tape all over our football stadiums from graduation that were painstakingly measured for social distancing. That tape still remains. So the potential is there for us to continue to request and limit capacity within our athletic facilities, and we would have to look at the same for our gymnasiums moving forward. We would also have to look at limiting field trips and activity travel until we know that it was safe for that to take place, which obviously is not our favorite thing to do, but for the safety of our children, making sure that we're limiting large group gatherings on buses and taking them to places where it's harder for us to control the sanitary environment of where we're taking them. Also, considerations will be limiting large group gatherings, and as a former high school principal, this is a painful one to me, but really looking at limiting or doing away with pep rallies at school during football season. It doesn't mean you couldn't be creative and do something within a stadium in an outdoor setting and reduce numbers, but the way a lot of schools have traditionally done them in the past with 1,800 students packed into a gymnasium is not a healthy or safe or smart way to approach things at this point in time. And so our recommendation would be that we really examine limiting or doing away with large group gatherings of that nature. The next two pieces apply to the students who are attending MCPS online or choose that option. So obviously arrival and dismissal and student movement is not going to pertain to them. However, breakfast and lunch, we do want to still make sure that for our students that select that do need it, that we make that available. And so I've talked to Ms. Johnson, and she has gotten a waiver that we can continue to offer grab-and-go services to our students that need those meal services that select MCPS online. So we would be able to provide those. Where those are, what they look like, we will work through the details once we know the numbers of students that are selecting that option that also need those food services, because not everybody who selects that option will need it. But we certainly want to make sure that we are taking care of all of our students through this time, no matter which option they select, and feeding is definitely a priority to make sure that all of our students have the nourishment they need to be able to continue a high-quality education. The other part of that, and this one was something we discussed for a long period of time within the scheduling committee, but all groups were on the same page that we recommend for students who are attending MCPS online that make that choice, that they not participate in extracurricular or athletic opportunities at their school. The reason being, if you are making that selection, more often than not, it's going to be for health and safety reasons. And if you are then coming to school in the afternoon to participate in clubs or other extracurricular activities or athletics, we certainly cannot control as much of what they're exposed to as you could if you are staying home. So obviously, we would want to make sure that we're continuing to look out for the health and safety of those students. The last bit I'm going to share here is the timeline along with our scheduling recommendations. So our recommendation with your approval would be to go ahead and notify our families this evening of the scheduling options. We are in the beginnings of July, and it seems like we've got a while before school starts, but it's going to be here before we blink. And when it comes to scheduling a school the size of Westport with 2,700 students, it takes a while to really redo the master schedule of what they've already put together. So we want to make sure that we notify parents quickly. We do have a website that we're going to share a little bit later that we have developed with all the information available to make sure we're informing our parents and our community of what their choices are, and then an opportunity for them to complete what their selection would be so that we can go ahead and report that information to the schools and they can start making their necessary adjustments to their master schedule based on the selection of their students. We would also send out skylerts and making sure that we're utilizing all of the appropriate media channels to get the information out as quickly and as widespread as possible. Parents could complete the survey online. Those who do not have immediate access to internet could always contact the school and talk with the school to let them know what their choices are for returning. We are recommending a deadline of July 15th, so that gives just a little bit over a week. Again, it's a very quick turnaround. Most of the districts that have done a similar plan have also given a quick turnaround with the understanding that we've got to get schools scheduled in a very short amount of time, and we are going to be asking schools at this point to redo a lot of what they've done with master scheduling to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students, and that's going to take a little bit of time. July 15th is also the day that Skyward goes down for our yearly rollover. We have to roll over our student management system every year. The reason being because we have to matriculate the fourth graders, the fifth graders, the students leaving elementary have to roll into their middle school, et cetera, and that takes a while for us to get all the data updated to the new schools. So that provides a perfect opportunity on the 15th when our assistant principals cannot do any scheduling on Skyward to then start reaching out to the families. If we have not heard from a family at that point, we can make individual contact to find out what their preferences are for the new school year. We can also find out if they have a technology need. Do they need a Chromebook if they're selecting MCPS online? Do they have internet access? Would they need food services? So we can make sure that we shore up all those needs at the school during that time period before Skyward comes back up. And at the end, any student who we do not reach, we do not hear from, we would make the default assumption that they will be reporting to our schools in brick and mortar. So we would go ahead and schedule them for a brick and mortar classroom with the understanding that it may change, and we have to be flexible. We all have to be very flexible in this time period, and our schools are used to that, and we'll be ready to handle that challenge. With the ultimate goal of our schedules being ready to go and students ready to arrive to brick and mortar, those who select that option on August the 10th. That is it for the scheduling committee.
Thank you. Yes.
Good afternoon, board members and Superintendent Gullett. I'm here today to present recommendations from the Health and Safety Committee. And I have my sidekick from that committee. She's a coordinator for student health and safety in our district, Andrea Simmons. So we're going to kind of go back and forth on some things because she is the more medically versed person than I am. So she'll jump in as need be. And I'm going to have her do the clicker as well. All right, so if you look at our first slide, there's a lot of information on there. I really think this slide right here sums up a lot of our work with our committee. A couple things you can see, some signage that we've created to put around our campuses. Obviously, the first one is, campus guidelines, and that would be something that we could present at the front of the building, the front door, and saying that, hey, if you have these symptoms, please do not enter. The other one is a sign that would be posted in hallways and in areas where you would want social distancing. So those are just two examples of some signage, and you'll see that throughout the slide. So as I get into prevention, the first word says educate, and I think this is the key to all of this as far as the Health and Safety Committee goes. I think education is the key, and I know Andrea and I have talked about this quite a bit, and education starts at home. And that's going to kind of change the mindset of the way we think and the way we've kind of operated in our school system. So first and foremost, educating all teachers and staff on health and safety expectations and procedures. Next one talks about training. So we have to train our students and our parents on appropriate safety measures, including screening at home. And again, that goes back to educating. I have two teenage daughters, one going off to college, and I can remember when they were in elementary school, they would wake up and say, oh, I'm not feeling good, I have a fever. And it might be a low-grade fever, and you might give them the Motrin and you send them to school. Unfortunately, those times have changed, and we have to be proactive and screen at home. And if your child is feeling ill or sick or for some reason has a temperature, instead of providing that medication, we need to keep them at home and monitor their health before sending them to school. So I think that's a big mind change and mind shift in the way we've been doing things. Next, it says advise, and we're going to advise our medically vulnerable students and staff to contact their primary care physician to develop a plan on them coming back. I think that's a huge thing. I don't think we can make that decision. I think they need to have those conversations with their physicians and see if it's feasible for them to return either back as a student or as a teacher or non-instruct or receptionist, whatever your title may be, to make sure that they're safe with returning. The last one covers a couple things, and it talks about reinforcement, and these are things that you'll hear throughout the presentation. Reinforcing hand washing. I mean, we go out now in public and you see those signs everywhere. Reinforcing hand washing. Reinforcing covering your mouth when you cough, or covering your nose when you sneeze, and what does that look like? And again, reinforcing that. Reinforcing wearing face mask, as we see here today. Especially when there's times where we cannot social distance, and I think that's the key. If we can social distance, then we're not asking you to wear that, but if we can't, obviously we would need you to wear a mask or a face shield, and I'll get into that in a minute. Marion County School Board is providing all employees with 15 masks, and I know a lot of those have already been distributed out to our schools. I believe it was in increments of 5, so every employee should have received 5 masks. I just had mine on, and I took it off, so you should have had that. Also, within our CARES Act and our funding for that, we're recommending the purchase of face shields for all students, not some, because that was some conversation that we had, Reverend Cummings and our, during the committee, was some, maybe our, our vulnerable students at some of our, schools with a higher ESE special needs population. But I think our committee was pretty adamant about all, and I think that's the key. And I think one of the other good things with that is when we met with the local Department of Health, we kind of talked through a lot of ideas with them regarding, face masks, face shields, desk barriers, partitions. I mean, we kind of threw a lot of things out there, and they kept going back to face shields because when I put the face shield on, I can still function within a classroom. If I need to go into a small group center and get some extra reading assistance at the elementary level, I can really do that because I have a face shield. It's going to cover my nose, it's covering my eyes, it's covering my mouth, versus a desk shield where I can do like this and now I'm above it. So that was great information from them, and so we appreciate that.
The face shields also allow people to still have a face. So with our masks on, students can't see the teacher's mouth, the teacher can't see the student, the animation of their faces. So us returning to a sense of being able to interact without face coverings is really important for interaction in the classroom, which is why face shields are important in the class.
Thank you. So you always miss something when you're presenting, so thank you. All right, on to the next slide, and you'll kind of see some more signage that we're looking to purchase. Obviously, one way, that's kind of self-explanatory, that would be used in our hallways or maybe in our stairwells at some of our schools. And then you also see the keep a safe distance. That would be if you've been to Target or Walmart or in those places, you see the stickers on the ground. Could be used in our front offices, could be used in guidance, could be used in media centers. Obviously, could be used in cafeterias to make sure students are standing 6 feet apart as they are walking through the line to get their grab-and-go breakfast or lunch. I think the signage, again, it goes back to the education piece, and I think the more we can put this stuff out, the more we can educate our staff and obviously our students to a different way of work. There's another one of our signs, and I'll kind of talk through that in just a second. But on to sanitation and disinfecting. The first bullet talks about washing hands, and obviously that sign would be something that would be posted obviously in bathrooms, in sinks in our classrooms at the elementary level and some of our secondary. No, you're fine. But just posting signs on how to stop the spread of COVID-19 and really how to properly wash your hands, and then promoting that everyday protective measurement. I think, again, it's going to always lead me back to that first slide and that first word of education. And I think that's what we have to do. Cleaning and disinfecting. We're going to clean and disinfect frequently touched surfaces within our schools and our buildings and our school buses, at least daily. For example, door handles in classrooms, sink handles, drinking fountains, seats on buses. I mean, I could probably go on and on and on and on, but you understand frequently touched. And then I think one of the other key components is those objects that are shared in some of our primary classrooms as far as kindergarten and first grade manipulatives and things like that. If we are going to use those within the classroom, that teacher would then need to make sure, those are sanitized between each use. So that's something that's very important. I know our custodial services are doing a great job of getting those supplies that we need to keep those areas clean and safe for everybody. The last point talks about discouraging water fountains. A few things you learn when you start dealing with health and safety that I never realized in my 22-year education career is that the health department will not allow you to shut off water fountains. I never knew that. So that's something that I learned during this committee. But we definitely are going to discourage the use of water fountains, but encourage them to be used with filling up, your water bottle. Within the CARES Act, we've looked at purchasing refillable water fountains. I'm sure some of you guys have seen those maybe at some of the gyms and places where you just walk up, put your water bottle under it, it fills it up, and then you walk away. One of the things I was thinking about and made a note of would be a great opportunity, and I know Judy Zanetti at the foundation has kind of started a little bit of this, but working with your business partner as a principal to see if you could get some water bottles donated. If we're asking kids to bring water bottles, yes, some can, but we always have, those few that can't. And so if you could get a school logoed water bottle, problem solved. Everybody has one now, and now we can kind of work through that process. Did I miss anything on that, Andrea? All right, awesome. Just making sure. All right, social distancing. Obviously, we're going to consider keeping classes together. I know that looks different at the middle school and high school level, and that's something I think we're going to have to continue to work through. Definitely at the elementary level, I know a lot of our upper elementary classrooms, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, a lot of teachers team teach. The recommendation would be, please go ahead and team teach, because that's, very successful for sure. But instead of the students moving, the teacher would just move classrooms, and then that's limiting those touch points on desk, and it's kind of keeping those 18 to 20 to 15 kids together all at once instead of cross-contaminating the room. So that would be one of our suggestions with our committee. Obviously, spacing seats out 6 feet apart in the classrooms. If that's not possible, because I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of schools that I've been at, some classrooms are smaller than others, and that's going to be hard. And I think that's where the face shields are going to be one of our best friends during this, because that's going to allow students to somewhat still have a normal functioning classroom where they can feel like it feels the same as before. So that's something that we definitely need to address. I know Mr. Whitehouse talked about this, but considering those communal spaces like our cafeterias, not using them if possible, if we can't social distancing. Again, things that I've been thinking through, I could definitely see at the elementary level, maybe staggering kindergarten and first grade into the cafeteria to sit them social distancing, because I know that we all either have kids or have grandkids, and man, sometimes kindergarten and first graders, they're going to make a mess in classrooms, and that kind of scares me on the other end. So that could be an option, but again, that's where we're going to give the principal and the administrator of that school the autonomy to say, hey, what works best for me? Can I make that possible? Again, it's going to be hard at some schools. It's going to be easier at others. Obviously, back to cafeteria, consider grab-and-go meals, and I know Mr. Whitehouse talked about that, and then staggering the use of the cafeteria when you can't social distance. Cover all that? All right. All right. Visitors. This was a really a lot of conversation during the committee, and everything that we actually looked at. We looked at multiple counties and their plans, and everyone that I know Andrea and I looked at, we're following to a T. And that's all visitors must schedule an appointment prior to arrival on campus. So if I'm a parent and I need to speak to the principal because I had an issue, or I need to talk to the guidance counselor because of a scheduling change, or maybe I need to have a conference with the teacher. We've walked up, we went to the receptionist, hey, I need to see Mr. Bennett because of this, and, we would be able to meet, or might say, hey, I need 10 minutes. But we're gonna have to have parents call in and schedule those appointments instead of just showing up. When parents call, we're gonna train our receptionists to kind of step them through our screening process, which would include a screening questionnaire. And I'm sure some of you guys have seen these. I brought it, I don't have it up on the screen, but it's just those basic questions. Have you been on a cruise in the last 14 days? Have you traveled internationally? And then, are you currently experiencing any of these signs and symptoms? So a very familiar questionnaire that you've probably have had to do yourself at the doctor's office or something like that. And then once they've kind of went through those questionnaires, we would document those answers. When they would enter, we would check their temperature. And obviously, if it was above 100.4, we'd actually reschedule that conference because that's, above the threshold. And then, obviously, when they came in, we would require them to wear a mask or a face shield, because I've seen some adults wearing face shields as well, and they'd have to do that while they're on campus. And we would also not have them bring in outside food. And I know that's something that at the elementary level, I know parents are passionate about Johnny's birthday and bringing in things like that, but I think as of right now, we got to kind of keep that on hold for right now, at least for, our first semester, and kind of reevaluate how visitors look at that point. And again, these are recommendations from our committee. Transportation, expecting all students to wear a parent-provided face mask or face shield. If for some reason a student is coming on the bus and does not have a face mask, we will have face masks available on our buses for those students. We will also have hand sanitizer available for when they enter the bus and when they exit the bus. And then cleaning and disinfecting. They will clean and disinfect following the recommended guidelines. That would be once, they drop off elementary, stopping and cleaning the seats, going up and picking up middle school and high school, and kind of doing that same process as each drop off and pickup. Obviously, creating social distancing between students on school buses where possible. But again, we're recommending and expecting them to wear masks. So that social distancing will be a little different because we're saying, hey, please wear a mask. I talked to Becky in transportation, and we're going to look at the first two rows, if possible, to utilize those rows for a student who maybe is not going to wear a mask, maybe not comfortable wearing a mask. And I know those are things we're gonna have to deal with on a first come, first served basis. We always know the first couple weeks of school, my bus could be a 60 load, but I might have 75 show up, right? And I think that's the thing that we'll have to work through the first couple weeks. And with talking to Becky, and like I said, I've been doing this a long time, after about the third week of school, that really thins out as far as those kids just showing up that maybe aren't assigned to that bus. Bus drivers will wear face masks and gloves at all times as well. Oh, yes, and thank you. And we will do assigned seating based on their route. So if I get on the bus first, I'm going to take those first, and we'll just work our way back to keep it consistent on a day in and day out basis. Signs and symptoms, I'm turning this over to the medical professional versus myself because she knows this way more than I do.
Hi. So for signs and symptoms, one of the first part is going to be screening students, employees, and visitors. Our main method of doing that is going to be first through the education part that we talked about, so that we're able to do that through visible signage, like the sign on the door that says stop. If you have these signs or symptoms, don't enter. That's a method of screening. Verbal questionnaires or even conversations with students, with employees, because with a verbal conversation, you can get key information that might make you think, hey, let's explore this a bit further. You said you were out in Alabama this weekend with your aunt and she was coughing. Well, we need to look at that. And that puts us on to the next part. The other part of screening would be visual assessments. So if you have somebody who's coughing, not but cough, 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 they're having excessive coughing. If they're flush, it could be that they have a fever, they could have been doing jumping jacks, but that's gonna be an indication for us to take that screening to the next level. With a student, they'd be sent to the clinic so that the health clinic assistant can evaluate them, take their temperature, and go from there. The biggest part with the education is making sure everybody knows that if you don't feel well, if you are exhibiting symptoms, that you stay home. We want you to be safe at home, monitoring your health and talking with your physician about what you need to do about the symptoms that you're exhibiting at that time, or experiencing rather. Planning for illness is a really big part. It's inevitable that when school starts, somebody will be sick, whether they have COVID-19 or the flu or strep throat. We plan for illness all the time in what I do. That's what I do every day with the clinics. So what we're gonna do is have our clinics, well, our schools are gonna identify an isolation area. For some schools, that could be that the clinic itself turns into the isolation room. So the teacher calls up to the front area, says, I have a student who feels hot, they said they don't feel good. They're gonna have a plan at each school, especially elementary, where they normally would go with a buddy. We're not gonna buddy to the clinic anymore. There's gonna be somebody to retrieve that student, walk them to the clinic. The clinic is gonna be aware that they're coming so that they can take any scheduled medications that are due at that time and hand them off to their backup, so that the backup can handle the normal everyday clinic duties of ice, Band-Aids, scheduled medications, or whatever else might come the way, and give the proper attention to the student who's coming in, who may or may not be ill. And then that's just them and the student in that area, whether it's the clinic that turned into the isolation area or another designated area that the principal is set up for the health clinic assistant or school nurse, because we do have some of those, to go with the student. So persons with fever greater than or equal to 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, diarrhea and/or vomiting, those are our common everyday signs of infectious processes. The new policy will be that they're excluded from school and shall not return until they are free of symptoms for 72 hours without the use of symptom-reducing medications. So that's a change for us this year. Previously, it's always been 24 hours, but CDC guidelines have now changed to 72 with what's going on in our community. So we will follow those guidelines, and parents will be aware of that, as well as employees. That's part of our education, is sharing that information. If somebody is ill, we're gonna close off that area. We're gonna make sure that we clean up where they are, and classrooms will have supplies. There's supplies throughout the school to disinfect. And we're gonna follow the procedures that are set in place by our custodial staff, because they're the experts in that department on cleaning. We're gonna advise parents, staff members, and students. If someone tests positive for COVID-19, they may not return until they've been cleared by a healthcare provider or the local Department of Health. So if you're a parent and you call and say, hey, Johnny's not gonna be at school this week because he has COVID-19, we're gonna let you know, upon his return, you need to have something from your physician or the Department of Health says that they're cleared to return. So a lot of that is, we're going to have that information anyhow. If we have a student or an employee who works in one of our schools or one of our departments, because it's not all schools, there's buildings that aren't schools. If we've been in contact with somebody, the Department of Health, that's their mission, that's their job, that's what they do. They receive notification of the positive, they research that, they have a team that does it, they do their questionnaire, and then they contact known exposures and tell you what you need to do and give you those guidelines. They would let me know for a student, just like we do with chickenpox and other infectious diseases that are reportable, when that student can return, and I would share that with the school staff that needed to know that information. And quite often, if necessary, they will share a letter that we distribute to the people at the school to let them know of what's going on. But we take our direction from the Department of Health on how we proceed if there is a known positive. I think.
Thanks, Andrea. The last piece of our recommendations deal with the mental health support. This is something that our school counseling and assessment team already handle, and we're already doing a lot of this. So I'm going to kind of just give you an overview of some things that we're already doing, and then some things that that department, some trainings that they're adding, and I don't have a nailed down date on that, but we're looking at providing these trainings during that district in-service day when we return. But I know they're still working through that right now. So we're going to provide staff with information on how to identify students who exhibit signs and symptoms of trauma. And I think that's the big thing that we're going to be dealing with when kids return, since they've been gone for a while, and how does that look, and kind of being proactive with that. Providing that social, emotional learning, mental health interventions, and we'll do that by using the framework that we already have in place. I mean, that department already has a great mental health framework that we've been using for a couple years, and our teachers and our administrators and our schools are very comfortable with that framework, so there's no need to change that framework. It's just kind of stepping through that and maybe just reassuring them that what we've been doing will continue to work with what we're moving into. Also providing training for school-based staff, discussing their current mindset and stressors related to COVID-19, and to practice self-care. And then also reassuring them that we already have the employment assistance program if anybody needs that assistance. It's already out there. We get emails once a month about that, and that's something that we can't forget that's still available. And last but not least, providing a training that's going to address stress and trauma for school staff, preparing ourselves to help students. And the company that's doing that training we already work with, and they're also going to tie in some cultural diversity training with that. And I know that company has already recorded that training, so it's ready to go. It's just school counseling and assessment kind of figuring out when we want to push that out. All right, that's all we had from the Health and Safety Committee.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again. At this point, now that we have gone through scheduling and health and safety, we'd like to take a moment to pause and look at the website of how we plan to communicate this information out to families. So I think, Mr. Christian, if you'll be willing to drive the machine for me so we can all see the website simultaneously.
Just a moment, I need to get that link.
No problem. We do have a nice screenshot there, Lisa. We can look at that.
It's not activated, that's why I have to put in my credentials.
Yes, this is not a live website yet until we get the approval to make it a live website.
Forgotten my credentials. I've not forgotten that.
That's it, Kevin.
Yay.
That's it, Kevin.
All right, so
Password.
the goal of the website is to make sure that we communicate as much information to families to help them make a decision what they would like for what's best for their child, but obviously not to overwhelm them with information. We want to make sure that we've given them enough to think about, and then certainly we can answer questions beyond. So you'll notice at the top we give just a brief overview about what we're all about, why we're making these two options available. We want to make sure that we are responsibly reopening Marion County Public Schools to meet the needs of all of our students and to make sure that we can continue to provide high-quality instruction for all of our students this coming school year. So after that, you'll see that there are two options there that they will be able to read more about to get additional details. The traditional option, again, which is our brick and mortar, students return 5 days a week to a normal school, as normal as we can call normal right now, school schedule. And then for those who are not comfortable with returning to school yet, the MCPS Online would provide them, again, the exact same instruction that they're getting in the brick and mortar classroom, but remotely. And so below each of those, there's just a brief information and then a Learn More button where you can click on those Learn More buttons and drill down to more detailed information about each of those options and what they would entail. So with the traditional, we include some of the health and safety guidelines that we are going to be implementing in all of our schools so that the parents can be informed about what those health and safety guidelines would look like if they elect to send their child back to brick and mortar school in August. And if you scroll back up, you can also toggle between the traditional and the MCPS Online and be able to see both options very quickly and what that option would allow for you. So again, quick bullet points below both of those. We've also included just some brief information on Marion eLearning and Marion Virtual School, just for those who would like to know more about that as well. And then below that, some very important information. One, we have a reopening frequently asked questions document on there. We know that we would not be able to present all the potential information on a website, but we do provide this to capture what we believe are going to be some of the key questions that parents will have about making a responsible decision. And so we've tried to organize those and provide as much as we can to be able to help them make that decision. And then you will see below that as well that you can look at what you can also do, and that's a very important link as well because it talks through things that our families can do, things our students can do, and things that our employees can do as well to make sure that we are all practicing safe hygiene and practicing good procedures that will help us reopen our schools in the fall. Below that, you will also see there is a questions and comments section. So if you would like to provide feedback, comments regarding the opening of school, there's an option for that. Or if you have a more school-specific question, you can certainly reach out to your school by phone. But if you would like to list a question on there, that option is available for them as well. And those questions will be routed to the appropriate school. The last thing on there, if you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see the big blue I am ready to choose box. When you click on that, it will take them to a form to complete. You will need to know some basic information about your child that you are completing the form for. Most importantly, you need to know their student ID number, or often referred to as the lunch number. So they will need to make sure that they're able to provide that when completing the form. And then you will click through and make your selection of which you prefer. Is it the traditional brick and mortar, or is it the MCPS Online option for them? Once they make each of those selections, there are some additional follow-up questions for them to respond to, such as, do you need technology for the fall if you select MCPS Online, so that we can go ahead and start collecting some of that information for the schools. But certainly our schools, once they know that, will start reaching out to those families to coordinate that as well. Once you get to the end to submit the survey, if you have multiple children within the school system, there is an option to complete it again for your next child to make sure that every child that lives within your household that's under your care, you're able to complete that survey for them quickly without having to circle back through the website over and over again. So I think that takes you through all of the big pieces. So again, thank you to the team that helped put this together in a very short time period, and we hope that this provides enough information to our families to be able to make a quality decision for their child.
Thank you.
At this point, I will turn it over to Mr. McAteer and Mr. Beck, who will get back into our reopening presentation looking at instruction.
Good afternoon, Reverend Cummings, members of the board, Dr. Gullett, Ms. Green, and Ms. Martinez-Lopez. We are excited to be here and talk about our committee. Our committee discussed instructional delivery. And we had a great committee. They were extremely engaged. I would like to thank Ms. Thrower for being involved with our committee and sharing her insights. I'd also like to do a special thank you to a student who took on our committee, which for a student may not be quite as exciting as scheduling or health and safety, but Francesca Mitchell, who's the president of the local NAACP Youth Council, did a phenomenal job, and it was outstanding to have a student's perspective on those types of things. So we were extremely grateful for her input, and we had, like I said, we had a great group of folks. And we really wanted to talk about several things today, but the first thing we wanted to do is kind of talk a little bit about what we've called in the past the summer slide. And you've heard us come to you over the years and talk a little bit about the summer slide, as it's called in educational literature, where students sometimes during their 8 to 12 weeks off during the summer lose a little bit of their academic progress that they may have made during the year. Well, now there's something new out there in literature that many of you may have seen called the COVID slide. And we want to kind of address that and look at combining it with the summer slide with some of our summer recovery options. And we're very excited about Liftoff 2020, which will be our summer recovery program, which will start next Monday, the 13th. And all of our traditional schools will have it for 3 weeks, 4-day weeks, and 6 hours per day. It will be funded by our GEAR funds, which are directly put aside for that type of early reentry program, also through Title I and Title IV funds, to be able to make sure that we put together a robust curriculum for our students. The students that will be included are our rising grades 1 through 6 and 9th grade. There'll be small groups of students, and we want really a 1 to 12 ratio at the maximum. Why is that? Well, first of all, for social distancing, we figured out that in most of our classrooms, 1 to 12 is about the most that you can go unless you have an extra large classroom. And also, we want to make sure that our students get individual attention during this critical time for their learning. So it's extremely, extremely important to us that we kept those types of things small. So who is our target audience? Well, our target audience is going to be those students first that, as I think Mr. Whitehouse alluded to earlier, were not with us during the 9 weeks, that were basically out of school, that through no fault of their own didn't have access to distance learning, and we want to make sure that along with our traditionally struggling students, we also address those students that may have been doing very well in school, but just for no fault of their own, were not able to access the learning that we had out there for them. So that will be part of our target audience. We're also looking at students that are rising into middle and high school. We think that's a critical time for our students normally, but especially during a time like this where they missed the last part of their 5th grade or their 8th grade year. They missed a lot of milestones, and we tried to do the best we could to make sure that they had them with our drive-through graduations and things like that. But they missed a lot of the preparation, the social preparation for middle and high school. So we really wanted to look at those students. Kind of wanted to make sure that we address foundational academic students in math and ELA and science, especially at the elementary level in science, but math and ELA. And we also want to talk a lot about transitional skills and especially for those students going into 6th grade and going into 9th grade. And we also know that socio-emotional learning, and Ms. Thrower can attest, as our group talked about this quite a bit, making sure that our students just weren't getting foundational academic skills, but they were also working with things such as self-advocacy, being able to express their feelings in a written way and also in a spoken way appropriately. So those are things that we're going to address in the curriculum because, quite honestly, if you're a student and you're sitting there for 6 hours in the summer and you're just doing ELA and math, no matter how much you love ELA and math, you really need some other things to talk about. And we also think it's critical to their development individually. So we really want to talk about that. We're going to make sure that they have breakfast and lunch, as I think Mr. Whitehouse alluded to earlier. Also make sure that they have transportation. Transportation will be furnished through the GEAR funds. It's going to be an academic refresher for our most vulnerable students, but as I said, we don't want it to be termed as all academics. We really want to make sure that we are having students come back to school. And I think that's what those funds were designed for. That's what our governor and our education commissioner have said. And we want those students to be back into and integrated into our school populations before we have August 10th and we have our mass opening. And also, quite honestly, as Ryan's group, Mr. Bennett's group had talked about, we want to have the ability to practice health and safety protocols. I mean, that's extremely, extremely important. that our students are be able to do that. And I can say that I think that our students will be more adaptable sometimes than even we are. But I think if we don't give them the opportunity to practice and the opportunity to be able to be leaders to their peers when they come back to school with what's going on, it just gives us an opportunity, and it gives our students and parents a great opportunity. So we're really, really excited about Liftoff 2020. I know our folks have been working very hard in our departments. The area directors have been working very hard, Becky's folks, Susan Johnson's folks. It's been a very, very team effort. I do want to say, as I always do here, shout out goes to our principals, because they have done a ton of work in a short time. I mean, and I've sat in their chairs, and, you know, to put something together in 3 weeks and hire folks and put together those things, they have just been amazing. So thank you to all of our principals for the work that they have done. So that was our first point. I want to talk a little bit about vulnerable students and prioritizing needs. So I think Ms. Thrower can attest to this. We came up with the idea that all students are vulnerable currently. What does that mean? It basically means, and I think that someone on our committee put it best, and it was a school board employee. When our students left on March 13th, we knew who our vulnerable students were. We had lots of processes in place. We had a multidisciplinary team. We had school psychologists. We had all kinds of folks. We don't know what these students have experienced since then. And it's been a varying degree. So students that weren't even on our radar are now students that we know that we have to make sure that we understand what they're dealing with and how we can help them deal with that. So I think our lens is going to have to change. We get so tied up in processes sometimes, and we have some great ones in education, but we really need to kind of open our lens a little wider, and we need to examine everyone as they come in. And I'm talking about during the school year as well as during summer recovery. So that was something that our committee felt very strongly when we talked about prioritizing needs and vulnerable students. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the students that didn't participate in distance learning are going to be who we would consider very vulnerable academically, as well as socially, because they don't have some of the things in place in their homes to be able to participate, which, you know, is sometimes indicates other struggles. So we want to make sure that we work with them. We also want to make sure that we look at our students on free and reduced lunch that struggle. We want to make sure that we look at our students with disabilities, our 504 students, our ELL students. We want to make sure we use our existing structures more efficiently to be able to identify those students, but more importantly, to be able to help those students. So we obviously have multidisciplinary teams. We have support from school-based counselors. We have support from school psychologists, social work assistants. But the biggest thing is it's a school-by-school process. I can't stand up here and tell you at Westport High School who the most vulnerable students are as opposed to Forest High School. So I think we have to, it's incumbent that we work with our principals to make sure that they understand what our expectations are and really, and they've run with this, really look at those students and make sure that we're not just using a one-size-fits-all approach. And that's one of the things that I think Jen will talk to a little bit. Assessment of student progress and loss. One of the things that we've got to do is we've got to make sure that historical, academic, and assessment data is more readily available. We have lots of data repositories, but it's got to become more teacher-friendly. I know I sent out lots of spreadsheets color-coded with lots of information. I printed lots of things, but we're going into unprecedented times. We've got to have teachers be able to have this information at their hand. You know, not have to go make 35 different swipes. So I know our committee felt very strongly about furnishing teachers when they came back with a snapshot of data through Mr. McGowan's department in school counseling and assessment, through our two departments, and also through psychological services, and really looking to give a snapshot of each student. And I think Ms. Thrower can tell you some of our ideas were very, very wide-eyed, but we're going to make sure that they happen, because I think that it's incumbent that we make sure that our students are able to have that information available to the teachers, because if the teachers don't have it, they can't make those decisions, and we want to make sure that it's there. So obviously we're going to, as I mentioned earlier, we're also going to have a list of folks, and the area directors have already furnished this to most of our schools, that who wasn't in distance learning. And I think me and Jen have some of that information too. That's going to be the folks that we look at too. But we're also going to use our traditional diagnostic screeners for our K-5, our DRA, our iReady. We'll use for our Tier 2 and Tier 3 students at grades 6-12, the screeners that we usually use to be able to do that. But again, as I said earlier, that's nice, but at 6 to 12, we're going to have to go way wider than we normally would. What we currently do will not work in these times. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we press to you today is that we understand that we're going to have to do a much wider scope of work in terms of working with these students. My last point is closing the achievement gap. And the thing about closing the achievement gap is it starts with well-planned and executed core instruction. Nothing's more important than the core instruction that goes into the classroom. And we know that that's what makes a difference. The teacher is what makes a difference in the classroom. Principals make a difference in terms of supporting them. We can support them, but at the end of the day, it's the teacher in front of them. So that obviously is a #1 factor in making sure that we close the achievement gap. We're also going to look at our appropriate reading and math interventions, employ them based on our diagnostic screener results. We'll have after-school tutoring at several schools. We already have that set up through a lot of our Title I programs, and we'll look at expanding that as necessary and really looking at when we do those programs, doing a very strong job of inviting folks to be a part of that program. You know, sometimes we put that out there and our invitations are very light, but our invitations may have to be very strong at this point based on what our parents can give us in terms of transportation and working with them. But it's very, very important that we identify those folks and give them the extra support necessary. And also, one of the things that we're also looking at already is the summer of 2021 enrichment and remediation programs. Traditionally, we started looking at those, October, November, and had our meeting in January. We're going to have lots of conversations with Dr. Gullett, with Mr. Vianello, about what we can do and what we can have planned to make sure that we have supports available and that we have folks knowing exactly what we're going to do. This has been a great time to put our summer recovery program together, but it's been 3 weeks. And 3 weeks may be a stretch, maybe 2.5. So we really want some time to plan and set aside some of the CARES funds and some of our other federal funds to be able to make sure that next summer we can do a wraparound to what we've done during the school year, because that's really, really going to be important regardless of where we are in the pandemic. It's going to be important that we address those things for our students. So Jen?
Thank you, Mr. McAteer, and that was a perfect segue to closing the achievement gap. So, thank you. One of the things I'd like to talk about is academic and social emotional learning support. So, all of our academic instruction begins with great tiered instruction, and Mr. McAteer just kind of made reference to that when he talked about good core instruction. But we know that some of our students, both traditionally and now even more so, will need varying tiered level of supports, and that will include reading and math. And we always make a very concerted effort, and it's very well designed as to how we are placing students to meet their remedial potential reading and math remedial needs. But now more than ever, we will not want to waste any time. We will want to make sure that we are using the data that has been provided to us, that we are making good, sound educational decisions, and that we are placing students to receive that support that they need, with the idea that we're closing the gaps as quickly as possible. So then that leads me over to the social emotional learning piece. Again, our committee, we had some wonderful team members that was really their expertise. So we talked a lot about what can we do as a concerted effort in our classrooms, pre-K all the way up to seniors in 12th grade. So at elementary, we were fortunate enough to already have a program, Sanford Harmony, and we are not only going to use that program, but we're going to ramp up what we have traditionally done with it. It always begins with a morning meetup. It's a meetup, buddy up. It's kind of setting the way of work for the day. It's kicking everyone off on a great positive note. But then there are actual specific lessons which we are going to be infusing into our curriculum maps at the elementary level. I know that Mr. McAteer has worked very closely with the school counseling team, and that they recognized a need for a solid social emotional program in grades 6 through 12. So they are in the process of purchasing a program called Habitudes, and not only will that be purchased and placed into classrooms, but of course there will be professional development that will also come with that to support our teachers and staff that are using that. When looking at our next bullet point, goal setting, we had a wonderful session with our group, and it was centered all around goal setting. And one of the things that came out of the discussion was that students can be owners and keepers of some of this goal setting, and that they can see what their academic goals are, what it's going to take to get there, and they can help monitor their growth towards those academic goals. We also then, it spurred great conversation about social emotional goals. And whether that is in kindergarten, that we're working on being a good friend to others. So what does that look like? And what would the goal that we set? And how can we check in frequently with students to see whether they're meeting their goals? Again, this is something that we'd like to see as a K-12 initiative. I know that we have already begun discussions with our school's counseling and assessment team about helping us to roll this out to all of our teachers and classrooms. And to be honest with you, one of the other things that we talked about is we talked about it from an adult perspective. We also talked about leading by example and creating our own personal and professional growth goals, and then what that does when we model that to our students, and that when we achieve those goals, how then we can come back and set new goals, again, as we're looking at achieving academic performance. And then I think one of the things that we would be remiss not to have talked about, which is on everyone's mind, which is identifying key missed standards. I mean, from the second we went into distance learning, I had folks, I had teachers, I had parents, community members. What are we doing with instruction? What are we doing with those potential maybe key missed learning skills that the students may or may not have gotten? So we have a plan for that. We've been talking about that for a long time. We've had great conversations between elementary and secondary, and we're really on the same page with this. And what we believe is that you are absolutely correct, that we have an obligation to make sure that we are addressing those fourth quarter standards, that our teachers did a great job teaching and putting out materials for our students to be interacting with, but we also understand that they may not have gotten the depth and breadth that they would have gotten in the classroom. Therefore, those fourth quarter standards across the board in K-12 are going to be addressed in our upcoming curriculum maps. I think the key here is I've heard lots of folks say that we're going to do a lot of front loading within that first 9 weeks. And there will be, to some extent, some front loading. But we've had great conversation that when we think about our standards, we also want to make sure that if we're reteaching or teaching the standards that occurred for the previous year, that we do that in a logical progression. And so actually, some of those standards will be embedded in where they would occur naturally within the curriculum map. We're going to make adjustments to the pacing and the timing of those curriculum maps, and both of our teams are busy working on those as we speak so that we can get those and provide those out to our teachers. And then finally, determining professional development needs. So any good instructional delivery plan also includes professional development. So you've already heard the one team talk about the need to make sure we're providing professional development on health and safety protocols. Of course, we are going to do that. Instructional technology and effective distance learning practices are also key topics that we want to make sure that we're providing to our teachers and our staff. But we also really talked about, from an academic point of view, the need to make sure that we are using our data the best way we can to inform instruction in the classroom, and to make sure that we're taking every opportunity and every piece of data that comes to us and maximizing that as we're making daily decisions with students in the classroom. We also talked about continuing to provide that professional development on social emotional learning. And then finally, a key piece for us would be differentiated instruction. And again, that word for me really means that when I'm the teacher in the classroom and I know that I have students that have varying needs within the room, how am I finding time throughout the day to making sure that I'm meeting them where they're at, and that I'm helping to close down those gaps and ultimately bringing them to as close to being on grade level, if not beyond grade level. So that was really the work of our Instructional Delivery Committee, and we appreciated the opportunity to get to work with the team.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Ms. Kiner will be in to talk about second interruption next.
She's on her way in. Can I say something, Mr. Cummings, while she's coming in? I'd like to say to the group while she's coming in to get started, Dr. Gullett knows I was on vacation. I just came back into town late yesterday afternoon for a quick meeting with Dr. Gullett late. And in my suitcase, I thought, my flowered mask. Just as I was leaving the house, I went going through my suitcase looking for my flowered mask, because the only other masks that I have are Trump 2020 Keep America Great. So I didn't really think that would go over too well in here. I had a whole fist of those. So anyway, sorry I don't have on my mask, but my flowered one is maybe at the condo, maybe in my car, I don't know. But I don't think Trump 2020 would have been appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Gullett, board. It's a pleasure to be here. So I am representing I had the honor of chairing the Second Interruption Committee that we certainly are hopeful that we do not have to activate. And it was an honor to have not only administrators, teachers, but also parents, community members. Special shout out to Ms. Kelly King, who served and was instrumental with her expertise on our committee. As well as, I certainly had the pleasure of having Ms. Rachel Sheely, who was one of my former students from Osceola Middle, who is a wonderful, amazing young lady at Forest High School, and she'll be a junior, so I was excited to have her. And it was also, in addition to that, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I had approximately 48 other additional, between community members, parents, teachers, and students that had reached out that had wanted to participate in the committee, that we were able to get their feedback with specific questions that we had that would come up in our committee, and then we would take those their responses and feedback back to the committee when we would meet in the evenings and in the late afternoons. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that. The first point that we have, oh, sorry, we still have, here we go. Second interruption. So certainly we did have an opportunity in Q4, as we know, to have and experience distance learning here in Marion County. We were able to gather the feedback from our schools, from our teachers and administrators, from parents, and from really who lived at our students. And so that was very important to us. We were able to take that Q4 distance learning, just the plus and deltas that we really learned. We had a lot of great experiences with it, and I think we had a lot of opportunities to see things that we're going to be able to implement as we move forward into the school year in August. But we also saw some things that we needed to tweak and that we really needed to work through and work on. So in response to the feedback that we were able to generate from all of those different audiences, as well as the members of our subcommittee, we were able to take their suggestions. We already had a K-5 elementary MCPS distance learning handbook is what we called it for Q4, and then we had a grade 6 through 12 one for secondary. We have branded it differently than distance learning, as you heard Mr. Whitehouse talk about a few moments ago, and we are going to be calling that MCPS Online because we heard from, again, the various stakeholders, and we did learn some things from Q4 distance learning. And so we know that we want it to look and feel very different if we do have to have a second interruption, where we would have to have a school closure or multiple school closures in our district in Marion County. So we took that feedback, and the committee was able to make suggestions and recommendations that we were able to add to our MCPS online handbooks. And again, we have a K-5 version and a 6 through 12 version, ensuring that best practices are met with the MCPS online learning that would take place for learning procedures and protocols if school closure does occur in the upcoming year. And not only for COVID, but this could be used for hurricane closures, any closures. The committee also utilized this Q4 distance learning feedback to update the instructional continuity plan, which is our ICP. Now, the instructional continuity plan we had, because that is a document that you do get approved by the Florida Department of Education, and we had that going into Q4 distance learning. And because it was something that our state of Florida had not experienced before. Now we know that we have been given additional guidelines and recommendations and requirements, really, that the state wants to see, that the DOE wants to see in our instructional continuity plans. So the committee, there was a small group, and we split our committee up into 4 small groups because we had a lot of work to accomplish in a limited amount of time. And so one of the small groups really focused in on the instructional continuity plan and making sure that we had not only the feedback from quarter 4 distance learning in there with everything that we knew we wanted to continue, but also things that we wanted to work on and tweak, but we were able to also take in the recommendations from the Department of Education and things that we knew we had to have in there into our instructional continuity plan that we are able to utilize should we have a second interruption and school closures happen in the upcoming time. We're also able to utilize that instructional continuity plan for our students that do choose the option and our families that choose the option for the MCPS online as well. One of the things that really came out that I want to point out from our subcommittee and as well as the feedback that we received from quarter 4 distance learning was that, again, as Mr. Whitehouse mentioned, really wanted to have one platform where all of the stakeholders would be able to go and find the information, the assignments that the teacher would be giving, communication that the parents and that the students would be able to go to know directly what they were going to be learning about for that day. And not only that, but more of a set structure, an actual teaching of the instruction. Our teachers did an amazing job within a limited amount of time to be able to pull off quarter 4 distance learning. And some of our teachers were utilizing the platform of Zoom and worked through a few barriers with that, but they did an amazing job at teaching and having instruction going on an almost daily basis. But our committee really felt like that needed to be a little bit more structured, and so those recommendations not only came from our subcommittee, but also, again, through the various stakeholders of the community, of our students, of our teachers, parents, and administrators. So that's outlined in the instructional continuity plan as well. The committee also recommended back to that platform, having that one platform usage. They really recommended that we, which a lot of teachers already utilize, Google Classroom as a platform, or they could choose Microsoft Teams, because we always want to give our teachers choice in the platforms that they're able to use. And if they're already comfortable with using Google Classroom, as I know many of them are, I know many of them used it. I know my son's teachers at Vanguard High School, the majority of them were already utilizing Google Classroom, and a couple of them began using it in quarter 4. And then we have just as many utilizing Microsoft Teams, which is another platform that's available in our district. So in August, when the teachers do come back during pre-week, that's certainly something that's a recommendation from our subcommittee, that we take a look and talk to teachers, and from the very beginning of the school year, really instead of utilizing the teacher webpage, they would utilize either the Google Classroom or the Microsoft Teams to have that one platform where, again, all stakeholders would be learning how to utilize that. And of course, there would be a professional development timeline that our committee also has recommended, so that the teachers feel comfortable with utilizing that. No one would, of course, ask them to utilize something that they weren't comfortable with. And many of our teachers have been taking the Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams training even during the summer, because I think they all knew that that was something that they needed to learn, or that they wanted to learn a little bit better. And so they've been very proactive, as teachers always are, and they've already been looking and going through that training with our district this summer as well. And so, of course, district staff would provide the technology and the curriculum support to our teachers to ensure that all of the instructional goals are accomplished through that platform as well. I had learning management system on here too. Another recommendation from our subcommittee was that, so we know that we have to have something up and running right away, and so we know, again, that teachers and many of our students are already comfortable with utilizing Google Classroom and or Microsoft Teams. So we felt that from the get-go, we wanted to be prepared at the very beginning of the school year with a common platform. So that is certainly something that we're going to talk a lot about during pre-week, and making sure that the teachers are comfortable with that. But in addition, our subcommittee did recommend that our district actually look at purchasing a learning management system, which again is a common platform. They looked at 3 different ones. They received a lot of information from the different companies that they looked at. They did recommend Canvas as a learning management system. That's the recommendation from the subcommittee. That's certainly something that can be looked at, but again, we would utilize some of the ESSA funds from the CARES Act if we were to purchase that learning management system. And again, even from the students that were there in attendance at our committee and the ones that I heard from via email or on the phone, they really, to hear the students and to hear the parents really wanting to have that one common learning management system and that one platform. And many of our high schoolers know that take dual enrollment. They already utilize Canvas because that's something that CF, our community college, utilizes here in Marion County as well. So they're very, they're used to it, a lot of our secondary students. So that will, again, include a professional development timeline that our teaching and learning and curriculum departments would help initiate. That's been recommended by the subcommittee for the timeline of that to happen. We certainly don't want to make anything mandatory from the get-go with learning a new learning management system. So we set up more of a timeline where teachers would be able to, anyone could try it at the beginning of the year, but it wouldn't be mandatory. And then we would look at secondary teachers to have a more streamlined timeline for them to hopefully be able to all utilize it by second semester. So that's kind of why we really need to have that common platform of either Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams from the beginning, because we know that's something that everyone's comfort level is up here with, and that way we have time to learn the learning management system. This is one of our questions from the survey that we gave out in June that we received almost 22,000 responses from our families. What are your technology needs for the fall? Again, ensuring that we have equity in our district is huge to me. You know that I've been up here before, and I'm a big advocate for all of our schools, but I mean, I live pretty much on the north side with my Area 1 schools and some of my in-town schools. So we want to make sure that we have equity everywhere in our district, and we know that according to this survey, we have approximately 37% of our students who need a device in order to be able to learn at home if we're going to ask them to learn with technology. And we know that we have at least 11% of our students who are in need of internet access. And while we know that we can certainly make our district one-to-one, and the committee has recommended that we order enough laptops for our students, and not only our students, but we also had one of my small groups look at and polled all of our staff in Marion County, because we have staff who were sitting at home and it was very difficult for them to be able to complete all of their job duties and responsibilities. And it's not that they didn't want to, it's that they didn't have what they needed to be able to do that. And so we have recommended that the order be placed for the laptops for our staff members, and then the ones that needed internet access for that as well. So not only for our students that need devices and access to internet, as well as our staff.
Won't a lot of those Chromebooks be returned, though, that the students had that will now be coming back to school?
Yes, ma'am. And so we will have those. We've had a decent return percentage on our secondary. Our elementary students still have them checked out because a lot of them kept them. We encouraged them to keep them over the summer for the enrichment program that was online. But we did deplete some of our schools. I know for a fact at Reddick Collier and Evergreen, I had to borrow some from other schools because we depleted the checkouts on those schools. And so we would, by ordering the amount that we recommended to be placed, we looked at the numbers not just by school, but in total for the district, because we always know we can reallocate. And we ordered what we needed to in order to make that equitable. So, yes, ma'am. Okay, we have the last slide here. So we also had a small group that really needed to talk a lot about essential employees and what that designation really looks like, and really defining really every job classification's job duties and responsibilities for school closures and what that looks like if we have a second interruption. And this committee was led by Ms. Oliver, and it's certainly one that we had Union on and Ms. King sat on. We had A lot of great discussions. We really had a lot of great input from what we knew took place in fourth quarter for a lot of our different job classifications, and then also what we felt the responsibilities could be. So really making sure that our priority was the security and the safety and the welfare of all of our employees here in Marion County Public Schools. That committee, that group of my committee was able to come up with a plan. They made, it's a working document of a spreadsheet, really, because we know it's always going to be fluid, right? You can make a document, but you know that every situation is fluid and every situation is unique in itself. However, we know that what we were missing in quarter four is we needed to be able to outline the job duties of each employee's job classification. And so this group did that, and they put that plan together. And so that if we have school closures in the district, we are able to utilize that document, and the job classifications for every job classification in MCPS is outlined on this document, and meaningful job duties that are beneficial to the students and the district. And it really outlines whether that person would be able to do those job duties and responsibilities in a hybrid work model, or if they were ones that would need to be an essential employee on school site. As we had to have some of the cafeteria workers and even our transportation workers who ran our grab and go for us to feed our students at all of our schools. And speaking of that, the last thing that this small group did work on, in order to support our employees, the plan does recommend a new school board policy to be able to pay employees who are performing work during the occurrence of an emergency, a disaster, or a public health emergency, while ensuring the district's compliance, of course, with applicable laws. So that is something that Ms. Oliver will be bringing to you in the future. We know that there's a timeline that we follow for any new school board policy, and certainly that's something that came out of that small group of the subcommittee, but we saw that with our cafeteria workers who were on the front lines. You know, there were a lot of our job classifications that, like our teachers, who did an instrumental job of pulling off distance learning quarter four. But we had people in certain job classifications, like our bus drivers and like our cafeteria workers, who really were on the front lines and making sure that they were instrumental in feeding our students and making sure that everyone was safe. And so that is something that came out of that small group of the subcommittee that I feel is very important. And again, I know Ms. Oliver will be meeting with each of you to bring that further recommendation from her as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last segment, and then we'll be wrapping up.
I know Ms. Boston knows to be good with this one.
She's our closer.
Closer, right?
Not quite, but close.
Talking about money.
Yes. Good afternoon. You've been very good this afternoon. No breaks or anything. So
Yeah.
I know how very much important it is to each and every one of you, to all of us. And but as we're shouting out to people, I want to shout out to Renee Sinjin, who works in the federal projects program for us, who accumulated all of the information that you have heard and put it into numbers that I can understand. She did a great, fantastic job, and I learned a lot about her in terms of patience and pulling together information from different people and then accumulating it in the posture that DOE requires. And that is also important. No matter what we present, we have to put it in the format that they have requested. That requires a lot of assurances and tying every penny to one of the assurances. And you may have heard that there were 12 different types of expenditures we could have had. And so she had to align all of these ideas under these assurances and again, put it in a format that they will accept. So I just want her to know how much we appreciate what she's done. Just to bring you up a little history, March 27th, seems like a lifetime ago, President Trump signed into law the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, and you probably have heard CARES. So within that CARES program, there are quite a bit of dollars available for school districts. And to promote the programs that we're talking about today, there's two different funding pots of dollars, if you may. So school districts got a call on June 12th and had to turn around a application within basically 2 weeks. This was really a good, I guess, joint effort between all the different areas that were involved, including all of the people that you've heard about as well. So once we had that webinar, we caught our breaths and started to work towards that. So again, as I stated, that the districts can use the funds for any of 12 purposes that have been outlined, but they have to focus on achievement gaps, students in critical educational transition, as well as safety nets for not only our students, but our employees. So prior to this grant application, our district had already started working on a plan. You may recall they've come before you talking about a soft reopening. But the requirements of this grant required them to expand the number of students that would be involved in it, as well as the offerings. Originally, again, it was due June 30th, but on June 30th, when Renee hit the button, we got another webinar that said they would extend it through July 15th. So that gives us an opportunity to get input from you as well as from the community before we, finally hit the button. But there are some things that we need to go ahead and purchase right now, and those are the things that you've heard about: the PP&E, some technology that we need to go ahead and place orders, because some of these items are on back orders, and of course we're competing with other school districts as well. So the first grant is called the Governor's Emergency Education Relief, and we call it GEAR, and that's our summer recovery. And as you can see on the slide, it's divided between, which is typically where our expenditures lie, even in a normal instructional year. $773,000 is for the cost of teachers, whether it's during the summer or after school. Because this grant originally was supposed to end August 31st, they extended it through October, so we can use up the entire 80 hours that they are requiring for instruction. We have an opportunity to do some of that as in an after-school tutoring. So expanding that deadline did help us because originally we were trying to crunch in those hours in 3 to 4 weeks. The next category would be paras, about $42,000. And then the receptionist, health clinic, assistance, and transportation are our normal requirements. And what I would like to add to that is these dollars will be combined with existing funds, the reading program, the 21st Century Grant, as well as our normal summer school. We call it ESY, Extended Summer Year. So those dollars plus Title I dollars. So all of those dollars will come together so that we can not only test out a soft reopening as well as meet the requirements of the GEAR grant. The next grant was the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, and we call that ESSER. I believe we make up acronyms first, and then we create the titles next. So when you hear ESSER, this is a 2-year grant, and our allocation is $13.9 million, and it's to cover a 2-year period. The original deadline for this one was June 30th as well, and it was extended to July 15. Again, will allow us to have input and make any necessary changes that we need to make. So the task force got together in the different groups, and as you can see, this is aligned with the different task force. The first one, scheduling, $1.5 million of this budget will go towards the task force that was the scheduling task force subcommittee. And this will be used for the MCPS. You keep hearing that, the online, that will be about $1.3 million in technology. We've also added about $15,000 for carts to assist the food service department in the grab and go. So that will take care of the majority of the expenditures that are listed under scheduling. The next category, the big one, health and safety, $3.2 million. Most of that is what you've heard as PPE, which is your personal protective equipment, face shields, face masks, sanitization equipment that we're going to purchase to assist our custodial staff, making sure that we're sanitizing not only the classrooms, but all the equipment around the schools, and then also sanitization equipment that will be used by transportation. The next category is instructional delivery, $3.8 million. In that, there is an allocation for our special populations, summer school for 2021, so we're already planning for next summer school. That's $1.5 million. Our social emotional learning, $92,000. And you've heard about the data cards, which is, it will provide information on our students that'll be shared with parents based on their student achievement and any gaps. And then also a new category that we discussed just as late as yesterday about meeting the needs of teacher absences. And we discussed bringing back the classroom sub that we had in all of our schools a few years ago. So, that'll help meet some of the issues that we're anticipating with absences with our teachers. The next category, the last category, is our second interruption, and that's about $4.4 million. And we kind of talked a little bit about the learning management system. That'll be about $800,000. And then the remaining balance in that category, $3.6 million, for the majority will go towards technology for our students as well as some of our staff. And I'll turn it over to Mark to take it home.
Thank you, Ms. Moss.
Reverend Cummings, believe it or not, when we prepared for this presentation, we were going to try to keep it to about an hour.
Yeah.
And so I think we missed by only about an hour.
Hour.
So there is a lot of information, and there was a lot of work that went into our 4 subcommittees because it is an important task that we were charged with. In the efforts of transparency, we want to post the details of what we talked about today online. So as soon as the board approves our plan, our website will go live. I'm holding here a 73-page document that is an overview. It's a summary. There's an executive summary. There's an overview of each one of our subcommittees with an action plan. That will go live as well. A reminder, we have the PowerPoint will be posted on our website. We want to inform parents. We want to educate students. We want them to make the best decision possible for them. So as you look at the summary slide, and I don't want to oversimplify this because you heard a lot of good information today, but what we're asking parents to do is to make a choice of 2 options. And if you choose your brick and mortar, if you choose the traditional learning environment, we're going to do everything we can to honor social distancing. And when we can't, we will recommend, we will encourage our students, we will not require our students, we will encourage our students to wear face shields and or masks. For those families that don't feel comfortable in that environment, we have, as you've heard, MCPS Online, which will mirror the traditional classroom taking place on campus. That will take place at home with the 6-period schedule following a regular bell schedule at home. So that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our lengthy our presentation. I will turn it over to the board for questions at this time.
I have one question. Do we need, what type of action do we need to take, so Teresa, so they can apply for the grant? Do we need to vote on those separately?
We've already submitted the grant application. What we need your permission from is to approve the grant so we can order everything that you saw on the last slides that she walked through.
Once we approve the plan, then you can actually spend.
Then we will order everything from the hot
So we don't have
spots
to do two votes, we just have to do the one vote, okay.
Okay. Do y'all want to hear from the public before we say anything?
Can we take a little break? Would it be possible to take a break?
Let's do 5 minutes, 7 minutes.
Sorry, but.
Meeting postponed for 7 minutes. Meeting is reconvened at 3:14 PM. We're going to hear public comments. Board, before we hear public comments, due to the number of individuals requesting, I think we have nine individuals that are requesting to speak this evening. I'm requesting a consensus to limit the public comment to 3 minutes each. Do I have
agree.
Consensus? Okay, we have consensus. So each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to speak this afternoon. Secretary Martinez Lopez, who's our first speaker?
Ms. Vicky Trelib.
Hi, my name is Vicki Trulebe. I live at 4700 Southeast 33rd Avenue, Ocala, Florida, 34480, Treulieb. Good afternoon. I come to you today as a parent and as a teacher. Today, you face a difficult decision, and one I hope that you don't take lightly. However, I do worry about that. Many of my colleagues have come to me concerned what this school year is going to look like, and I would be lying if I said that that hadn't crossed my mind too. See, I'm concerned because the corona cases are surging in Florida. Marion County is over 1,000. When we shut down schools, we didn't have nearly as many. Just yesterday morning, I saw a headline about how the cases in local youth has soared. And on August 10th, I'm supposed to go back to a classroom filled with these local youth and risk my life to teach them. Let the weight of that set in. Teachers and school staff will be risking their lives to teach these children. And some teachers will gladly do it because we realize how important our jobs are. Some teachers will grudgingly do it not because they don't want to, but because they have to in order to support their families. And some teachers will refuse and quit their jobs, adding to our teacher shortage. I want to go back to my classroom. I pour my heart and soul into my job every day. I love my job, and I love my children that I teach that grow each year to become my own. However, I love my own children, and I worry for them. I'll be risking my life in a classroom to come home to risk the lives of my family or risk my children living the rest of their lives without their mother. My youngest daughter is 20 months old. Would she even remember me if something happened? I look at you seated before me here. You're spread out, not in your usual spots, because COVID-19 has changed things. Your secretary even asked me nicely to step back for social distance. However, will this be possible in my classroom? The CDC has its recommendations, but will you follow them? Is it feasible? Forgive me for thinking that it's not when there's also a classroom size limit in place and it's not followed. I had over 40 kids in my theater class at the beginning of last year. One year I had 37 in my English class. If that's the case this year, how do I properly social distance them for all of our protection? Would you be willing to come in and help, knowing that you could not spread yourself this far apart from them? When I go to the gas station or the grocery store, I see that COVID has changed. There are barriers between clerks and customers. The clerks wear masks. They're constantly cleaning surfaces. The cashier at Wawa has more protection now than I will when I'm in the classroom. Please tell me how my classroom will change. Will I have the luxury of barriers, masks? Will you be providing proper disinfecting materials, or will I once again have to rely on a wish list for parents to provide and pray that they do for their own children's lives are at stake? Please tell me how we will decide between the teachers who get the luxury of teaching online versus the ones who have to teach in person. Does teaching in person grant teacher hazard pay? Does everyone have to teach in person? I speak here for the older teacher near retirement suffering from multiple underlying medical conditions. I speak here for the teacher who recently had surgery, the teacher who had a baby, the teacher who takes care of their elderly parents. Do they even matter? And our students. We want to go back because it's best for them.
Truly.
But thank you.
So we sit here for 2 hours listening to a presentation,
Yeah.
and we have nine people speaking. You can't give an extra 20 minutes.
What if those students become infected?
Miss
Then what if they
Truly,
infect others?
Miss Truly,
And surges,
Miss Truly,
we don't know the long-term
Miss
effects of
Truly,
what's going to happen to these.
who's our next?
They might be minimal, they might not last for 5 years, 10 years. Think about it.
Ms. Robin Coper.
I'm trusting you for the sake of everyone to make the right decision.
Good afternoon, Chairman Cummings, board members, and Dr. Gullett. My name is Robin Coper, and I've taught in Marion County for the past 20 years. I'm a 2014 Golden Apple recipient. I am passionate about teaching, and I miss my students. Last year, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I underwent a full craniotomy brain surgery at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida. This was my year to feel great and recover and for life to go on. During the time of my diagnosis, I developed a seizure disorder. Medication has enabled me to control my seizures, and at this time, I am neurologically stable and am doing well. Contracting COVID-19 could change all of that. My doctor states that I have a distinct neurological vulnerability to COVID-19, which could lead to serious hospitalization and having to be induced into a coma. I am here today to speak on behalf of every high-risk teacher in Marion County. We have devoted our lives to our students. We now ask that you protect our lives. As I look amongst you, I also see board members and superintendents social distancing. We ask that you give your students and teachers the same protection to socially distance. And what I just heard from the safety committee is scary. I am more scared now than before I got here. How can this be accomplished in a room of an average size with 20 or more students? Many of us are afraid, we are stressed, and we wonder how we will teach our students effectively with the daily panic of dodging COVID-19. I'm going to be a mess in my classroom. If you think they're behind now, I don't know what they're going to get from me because I'm going to be panicking every minute. Teachers never imagined a time that we would be forced to choose between our lives and our jobs. Some of us fear we will lose everything if we leave our jobs. But I guarantee you, some of us, a lot of us, will leave to save our own health. We ask that you, our leaders, advocate for your high-risk teachers and every teacher in Marion County. We are trusting that you'll make decisions not based on pressure or politics, not on politics, but on the health and well-being of our community. This too shall pass, but human lives cannot be replaced. Who has stood up to our governor? What one of you have called him with concerns, have reached out to him? Because I know you have clout that I don't have, okay? I walked into here today. I'm at risk. Everything comes from Publix delivered to my door. My husband has been asked by the Mayo Clinic doctors to work from home, and so far his boss is allowing him to do that. I come here today, I walk in, and the person that is going to scan me does not have a mask on. I had to ask someone else to go get a mask so I could be scanned. As I sat out there waiting, so I got here early so I could be one of the first to speak. Many of our leaders, district leaders that have been in this room, were not wearing masks and were well within 6 feet of me. I had to use this shield because this protected them, and I had that on the entire time. This protected me from them. It's sad when I couldn't come to a school board meeting today and feel safe in the lobby. And that's how serious our leaders are taking this. People need to stand up, not worry about a vote, and start worrying about human lives. This is going down in history. This is not about politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Copeland.
I have items I have to pick up.
Lindsay Griffin.
Lindsay Griffin, Griffin. My address is 19150 Southwest 92nd Loop in Dunellen, Florida. Members of the school board, my name is Lindsay Griffin. I'm a special education teacher, and I'm currently teaching a self-contained special education class at Marion Oaks Elementary School. I am also a special education parent. My son, who has spent the last 2 years in the developmentally delayed pre-K program, begins kindergarten in August. I'm sure by now that you've heard many concerns about the ability of our school system to practice safe social distancing while providing face-to-face instruction. I'm sure you've grappled with how to keep kids apart on buses with dozens of students, how to continue with mandates for physical education and safety drills. I'm sure that you have been approached with concerns for providing COVID testing and screening to kids who come to the clinic with symptoms but may not be able to go to health departments for their own test. Whether or not to enforce quarantine for teachers and classmates of infected students, how to give teachers sufficient sick leave, and what to do about enticing substitute teachers to serve during this time. These are concerns we all have. I'm here, though, to bring up some concerns you might not have thought about, which concern our most vulnerable students. Self-contained special education classes often have to create and play by their own rules, and many of those rules are in direct contrast with social distancing. Many of our special education students require physical prompting and hand-over-hand assistance to complete assignments and remain safe, as outlined in their IEPs. How do we remain in compliance with those requirements and still keep safe social distance? Many of our special education students require positioning and need to be lifted in and out of devices throughout the day. Many of these transfers require 2 people. How do we do this and still keep safe social distance? Many of our special education students require diaper changes. How do we do this and still keep safe social distance? If I'm expected to wash my hands after every physical encounter with a student, significant amounts of instructional time will be lost. Many of our special education students are unable to feed themselves, cover coughs or sneezes, position their own masks or shields, safely wear a mask or shield, or tolerate wearing a mask or shield at all. Many students already struggle with speech, and masks and certain shields will further exacerbate their frustration. How do we help them with this while maintaining safe social distance? Many of our special education students have difficulty recognizing our faces and voices when they're covered by masks or shields, and they become frightened by the change in appearance or sound. How do we help them with this while maintaining safe social distance? And if our special education parents choose to keep their children at home, what will be available for students with accommodations? What will be available for students receiving hands-on therapies, such as my own son? What about students on modified curriculum? I don't have much in the way of answers, and quite frankly, I don't expect you to have them yet either. What I do expect is for you to take these concerns, the concerns of our special education population, which includes students, parents, teachers, paras, and therapists, into explicit consideration when formulating plans and policies. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin.
Cheryl Lindstrom.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Lindstrom, Lindstrom. I live at 2176 Southeast 50th Terrace, Ocala, 34480. Good afternoon, board members, Chairman Cummings and Dr. Gullett. I'm a classroom teacher. I have a lot of questions, some answered today, some not so much, and I have concerns for schools opening. These are not in any particular order. So if I leave the classroom door open to avoid touching it too much, now I'm in violation of the protocols for Alice and that the door has to be locked. Social distancing, as you are right now, but how can we social distance for fire drills, for code red, for code yellow, or active shooter drills? A student gets the virus, now what? The teacher's quarantined for 14 days. Does this require sick leave, personal leave, paid, unpaid? What about the other students in the class, the other students in later classes? My students have 6 teachers, 6 classes a day with an average of 20 students per class. That's 126 exposures. There are 1,400 plus students served by my school. If I catch the virus, are my medical costs and lost wages covered by workman's comp? Are we checking temperatures? Are we wearing masks? The governor and the Surgeon General reminded Floridians on the 4th of July to protect the vulnerable by avoiding the 3 C's: closed spaces, crowded places, and close contact. This describes a middle school classroom. They warned Floridians to continue best practices of social distancing. Stay home with symptoms, clean and disinfect surfaces, wash your hands. Social distancing at 6 feet. In schools, we grapple at trying to get students 3 feet apart for testing. Stay home with symptoms. Parents send sick kids to school all the time. Clean and disinfect surfaces. With what and by whom? This will need to happen after every single class period. In salons, a 15-minute gap between clients is required for disinfecting. At my school, there are 4 minutes between classes. Wash your hands is a great idea. In my hallway, there are 2 bathrooms with a total of 4 sinks and 2 hand dryers and approximately 250 students per building. Consider your teachers, faculty, and staff. We have risen to the occasion and in an instant became virtual online instructors. We practiced our craft with fidelity and worked diligently to provide a quality learning experience for our students. We worked well beyond our contract hours. We deserve and have earned some respect, to be valued for our contribution, to be considered when your decision is made, as we are the vulnerable ones. I miss my students, I miss my colleagues, and I miss my classroom, but I do want to live. I'm asking you to please implement, do I need to just quit? Is that what happens to the vulnerable ones? I've read the executive order issued by Mr. Corcoran requiring schools open August 5th, in August, 5 days a week. I've read the OSHA Act of 1970, the General Duty Clause, that specifically says that each employer is to furnish everyone employment in a place that's free of recognized hazards and that could likely cause death or serious physical harm to the employees. I'm asking you to implement a delayed start, or at the very least, a staggered attendance, maybe half the school for 2 days with a day for deep cleaning. Your decision will resound for generations, and please make the right one for your teachers and our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bishop David Sexton.
Bishop David Stockton. Bishop David Stockton.
Mr. Bishop,
That's his title, Bishop.
thank you.
I don't know how many times I've heard that, Mr. Bishop David.
I apologize.
No problem, no problem. First and foremost, let me say thank you. I am James David Stockton, Bishop in the Lord's Church, but I represent the NAACP. I am the newly, as of last night, elevated president of the chapter. But I stand here today, and I wanted to take the time to say thank you, but I know my time is short. I've heard all of the COVID-19 plans, and I would applaud some of them to a certain extent. But in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, our concerns as a community, and I've been up literally all night and most of the morning talking to constituents from all over our county. But when and how, it's not so much should we open school, because I know it's important that we open school. When we open school, I question and how we open school. I'm very concerned. I saw the executive order on yesterday. Well, I actually got it this morning, the executive order on yesterday. I read it like so many others, and I questioned this August 10th opening. I know that we have to have so many hours per school year, but again, my concern is the safety of our children. I said I wasn't going to say it because I didn't want to make it personal, but I have a daughter who is entering into the 12th grade year at the Great Westport High School. But I also remember how many times I've gotten called from administration about the concern of my daughter being tardy for her next class, and to actually have to have escorts to go with her so that they can see how long it takes her to get from one class to another, to then get the report back because of the crowds in the hallways. They're taking time. She would get me late for class, going from one place to another. I know that we've talked about how the students might change and how they might not change. Well, that's all right for certain places, but as we've heard on this morning alone, the World Health Organization just announced that in closed confines where there is central air and things of that nature, most air conditioning units do not pull in fresh air. So it's recirculating the air. So the concerns that a teacher might have today about, a student being in a classroom and maybe taken out because they're sick, those toxins and things are still circulating in the air. So again, and I'll be a preacher that'll be honest to my time. I want to make sure, and my community wants to make sure, that if we decide to open schools, we have checked all the boxes, answered all the questions. Because again, our community is being hit the hardest all over the country. This weekend alone, We doubled in our whole entire COVID cases, but you can't even count that for being for 4th of July weekend. We won't find out about what happened 4th of July weekend for another week or two. Then we need 14 days. So my question is, if we have to start school in August, does it have to be the 10th? Why not the 31st? It still covers the mandate, but it gives us more time to research what's important for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stockton.
Axel Martinez.
Axel Martinez, 4103 Southeast 6th Avenue, M-A-R-T-I-N-E-Z. My name is Axel Martinez. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm a physician in this community, board certified in family medicine, geriatrics, hospice and palliative medicine, and even obesity medicine. And I've been witnessing firsthand, working in the skilled nursing facilities, what happens in the most rigorous, protected environments that we have for the vulnerable elderly. And there's meetings every day, and there's rule changes every day, and there's massive amounts of testing, and there's people dying. And when we closed the community open, we only had one facility that had it, and now we have 9. And this is with the most rigorous protection there is, the most disciplined healthcare providers out there, like us and the hospitals. And we are not at the best position in the world to do this. And the Health and Safety Committee is not prepared for having the people in-house. The second interruption is where the money's at. Second interruption is what's going to happen, because it's not just about the kids. The employees in the schools are going to be a lot more at risk than the kids themselves. Physically, health-wise, the odds are that the employees are going to take a lot bigger hits than the students themselves. And what's making the buildings positive is not the patients in the facilities. It's everybody from the outside. It's the nurses, it's the doctors, it's the administrators. The people in the community are getting hit, and if the kids are bringing that home, even if they don't take health hits on their own and they can wing it, the parents, the grandparents, the uncles, the aunts are not. And that's going to cause a whole spur into society of what's going to happen. Testing is super important. And even in the Health and Safety Committee, we're talking about delegating that to the primary care physicians. The primary care physicians are not ready. Like the Department of Health is, there's a 4 to 5, 6, sometimes 7-day waiting time on that. The most vulnerable population, which is the skilled nursing rehabs, they have a 2-week mandate on all the employees being tested every 2 weeks. There's nothing taken into consideration with that on the Health and Safety Department. Everything is just delegate. Kids are mostly asymptomatic, so they can spread it at will to other colleagues, and they can spread it, and when they're screened, they're negative. But the parents are not going to be asymptomatic. The grandparents are not going to be asymptomatic. And then that spreads to the workplace, and then the workplace spreads everywhere else. So the decision is not just about the health of the kids. It's about the health of the entire community and how that can spread to other people around. And everything eventually gets, and the employees are most at risk, not just the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez.
Samantha Richmond.
Hi, my name is Samantha Richmond, R-I-C-H-M-O-N-D, 22 Fur Trail Drive, Ocala. I had some concerns coming in, and after hearing the committee's recommendations, I'm thrilled with what they said. I like the kids going back 5 days a week. I think it's important for children to be in the classroom. I have 4 children myself in Marion County schools, 2 in elementary, 2 in middle, and I think it's important for their mental well-being to be around their peers, to be in school. So I want to fully support everything that both committees said and thank them very much for the time and effort they put into creating their plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Richmond.
Mark Avery.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Avery, A-V-E-R-Y. I live at 3 Diamond Ridge Way, Ocala, Florida, 34472. And I'm the president of the Marion Education Association. And so I represent all the instructional employees in the district, not just ones that are members of the association. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you, Dr. Gullett, to Marion County. I wish it was on normal circumstances. I cannot replace the comments that those teachers have brought to you. That's what my life has been 24/7 for at least the last month. And I have kept our committee stuff quiet, as that's what we worked on until you guys had an opportunity to weigh in on it, which has frustrated our teachers even more. So I'm hoping that moving forward, we can continue this awesome partnership that we've had over the last few weeks and keep working together, because obviously there's a lot of unanswered questions that we still don't know. And there's not going to be a thing that fits every single person, and I understand that. And I think we realize that we need to be flexible, and as Mr. Whitehouse said earlier, the teachers need to be flexible, and the employees need to be flexible, and we, our administrators and everybody. But we have to keep working and try to find the solutions that work best for everyone. I've talked to almost every one of those people at least 3 times since we've started having these meetings. So, and I've talked with some of you too. So we're in the same boat together, and I hope we continue to work forward for whatever we have to accomplish. We know it's changing by the day still. Why we've been here, the governor extended the emergency management order another 60 days. The president is having a press conference at 3 o'clock about school reopenings. And that statement yesterday has gotten Florida all the national media attention that we need, because everybody has been contacting us. I know our state president has been doing interviews all day. He'll be on CNN tonight. So if you want to see at 9 o'clock, if you want to see what FEA's position and our advice is for that. But I also want the teachers to know that we have been advocating for them, because they're not in the meetings. And the people that have been in the meetings have heard that every single time I've been arguing for those points. What are we going to do for the vulnerable? What are we going to do for the people who can't come? What they have parents at home that they're taking care of? That I've been trying and advocating in every single meeting for them. So, and along with all the other members that we had on all the different committees. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for the partnership that we've been doing, and I hope that we continue to work that way. And again, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Avery.
And our last is Lisa Mercado.
Hello, my name is Lisa Mercado, and I have a child in middle school in Horizon Academy. I work in the nursing field, and my key concern is the safety of the students and the teachers. How do I know if this teacher is not infected, or that child is not infected? How are we going to do this? Because none of the kids under 18 have really been tested. When we go to these test sites, they're requiring you to be 18 or older to get a test. You know, why open right now when the apex of the spread is going to start in August? You know, really, like, it's spreading now through the county. Why open and then close? Get your teachers infected. Get our students infected. Really, why? Why? Can anybody answer that? Can any of y'all answer that? I'm really concerned. I'm concerned for my child. We have no underlying conditions. Great, my child will be fine. But how about that next child? How about that teacher that was here talking? We're in a pandemic. We're in this enclosed room. Everybody that came up to the podium in the beginning, they came and took off their mask and started talking, touching everything. The particles stay in the air between 4 and 7 hours. All these people who talked, took off their mask and kept on going. Yes, this is unsafe. This is unsafe for your teachers. This is unsafe for the students. I don't know what else to say. I just learned about this today. So I didn't have that fancy planned out, you know, everybody had a question and it was all fancy and planned out. We're in the midst of a pandemic. You need to listen to the health professionals. Your teachers are going to get sick. Your students are going to get sick. We got 1,000 here in Marion County and counting. Those 1,000 people, each one of them, have 4 to 5 people in their families. What are we going to do, really, when it's just going to continue to spread? Yeah, I know we all got to get back to what we're supposed to be doing, get our kids in school, doing this and that. It's not going to work. These poor teachers that are older are going to get sick, wind up dying or something else. How are they, you know, I don't even know what else to say. But I said my piece. I don't, you know, it is what it is. But I would like you guys to answer the one more question. When the kids start getting sick in the schools, then are you going to close down again? You know, in the midst of the pandemic, you know, are y'all going to close back down? You know, I'm really confused because we had a slow start here in Marion County to, you know, getting the COVID test started. Everybody was to go to the district if they need, you know, the Marion County Health Department if they needed to be tested. But not anybody wants to go down there. They're afraid to catch it if they go down there. You know, I think y'all are making a big mistake, and I'm sorry I feel that way. But it is what it is. Thank you so much, board members, for your time. And hopefully we don't have that.
Thank you, Ms. Mercado.
Oh, my name is Lisa Mercado, and my address is 15085 Southwest 35th Circle.
Thank you. First, before we start, let me go ahead and say this. We didn't say it at the beginning. We want to welcome Dr. Diane Gullett, our new superintendent. What a way to come into the district for your first meeting. But we're in some difficult times. We have to make some difficult decisions. So, board, we have heard nine people give some comments. We've heard the presentation that was given by our district, and let me say this for the record, and Ms. Boston Ellis hit it when she said that we got certain mandates or certain instructions that we had to get things done in a very short time frame. We wanted this plan, this back-to-school plan, or reopening plan, to be the new superintendent's plan, and that was the right thing to do for her as going forward. So that's why it seems people may think we're doing it delayed. It's not delayed. It had to be timed right, but we were on a short time schedule to get this stuff done. I'm glad we got the extensions. I'm glad we had those extensions. Mr. Villanello and the group of people that were working on this task force, all of us worked on the task force. Each one of us worked on one component of it with this. There was community input. There was teacher input. There was collective bargaining input. Am I saying that right, Mark? Although we had input from everywhere, business input, we had healthcare providers as well on the committees to try to make sure that we were covering things. There is no way that we were going to cover every possible scenario. That's for the record. There's no way we're going to cover every possible scenario. So the plan that was presented was the plan taking in the input from all those different entities. So we're going to go ahead and entertain this discussion about this, what we heard about this, the plans that were presented, the options that were presented. And Dr. Gullett, I'll let you start.
Thank you, Chairman Cummings and members of the board. These are incredible incredibly challenging times. We've had a lot of conversation around this the last few days, even with staff, and I want to comment, start with the end in mind, and a comment that was made earlier from a speaker. The conversations and the work doesn't stop today. Just because the presentation's coming before you as the board, this is going to continue. We need to have these crucial conversations. They will continue. We will be flexible. We will adjust, and we know that we can't predict what the future looks like. And so I just want to make sure that you all are aware and the public is aware we are absolutely committed to doing that. This is a fluid process, and we're counting on everyone who's been involved, and for the public at large, the community, the parents, the staff. Safety is our paramount concern for students and for staff. It's been said over and over again, and I want to reiterate that. We're pleased to present choices to our families, but understand there's challenges with staff as well. But we also want to equip our staff and students with resources too, because we want them to safely learn. We want to provide a safe working and learning environment. So it's a delicate balance. And so we are committed to continuing to hear and what the needs are and the concerns, and adapt and make recommendations as appropriate. So I want to commend the group for the work done so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett. Board members?
Can I start? First of all, Dr. Gullett, welcome. A couple of points. Why do we need to get back in school? I serve as the executive director of the Children's Alliance, and I'm very proud to say that Brad Rogers, who is in the room today, serves as the chairman of that board of directors. We have children. We have not had eyes on children in 6 months. I had a conversation with the executive director of Kimberly Center last week. And although DCF referrals on abuse and neglect are down, they are down because our schools do the majority of the reporting. But what she did say was that what she is seeing, those that have been referred, are worse than anything she's ever seen. So we must get our children back in those classrooms. The achievement gap is going to be very large. From those who chose not to distance learn to those who did not have the opportunity or the resources to distance learn. Our children's mental health is at risk, and not just our most vulnerable, but all of our children have been away from their friends, been away from activities, so there's going to be some challenges for all of our children. But I believe very strongly that we must get them back into school, and I'm a proponent of that. I want to thank the task force. I do think it's a good plan. We talked yesterday about some things we can do in the classrooms for disinfectants and some other things. As Dr. Gullett said, this is a fluid plan. Just because we vote today does not mean that this plan does not change. But I believe that getting our kids back in school is important. I want to thank the task force. I want to be sure that on the website, if parents have questions, that they are emailed back as quickly as possible, that we have somebody checking those on a regular basis. I talked about a chat box maybe, but if we can't have a chat box, we need to be sure that we're not waiting 24 hours to get back to these parents, because they have a week to make a decision. And there is an option if they're not comfortable with their children being in the classroom. We have given them that option. So I am a proponent of supporting this plan and moving forward. Thank you.
Let me say. Okay, I agree with Ms. McCall. I think most of us probably know people that during this time in different families, we've had friends share with us that drug abuse is up, alcoholism is up, and that affects the children in the family. I went to the health department, the Department of Health's website, and more children have died from the seasonal influenza than have died from COVID in a 4-month period. In the COVID's 4-month period and in the influenza season 4-month period from October to February, 10 children died from influenza and 3 have died from COVID under 18. So we, there's been times we probably almost needed to close the schools when influenza became so bad. That teachers were sick, students were sick, and the schools were really down in numbers, that we probably could have closed. And during the Hong Kong flu pandemic, they did do that. They did close schools in the areas that it got bad temporarily until people recovered and could get back, sometimes a couple of weeks. I shared with Dr. Golick, and she also had reviewed the same document, where the Medical Association of 67,000 pediatricians recommended we get these kids back in school immediately, as quickly as possible. And they also gave some guidance. They said that the middle and high school students, the more secondary age, can understand a lot of social distancing, a lot of the masks, but that the elementary children really can't, and that it might do more emotional damage to them to be constantly separating them, tell them to put on their mask, than the COVID virus could ever do to them, because they don't understand. Because I guess we've all heard of the different things that, our children do. I mean, they're compulsive, they hug people, and they do these things, and the elementary children don't understand. And then we have some that just have the defiance that they won't do. And the elementary teachers are just not going to be able to, we can't expect, my goodness, our elementary schools can't even control head lice that we can see. So we can't expect them to keep a cootie away from children that they cannot see. So we're going to have this, there's going to be a real challenge at the elementary level. And at least at the high school level, the teachers can wear their shields, which I would totally support, whatever it costs us to buy the shields, if they feel more comfortable. Like one teacher was speaking that had the health problem. Oh, I'm hyperventilating in this thing. And so if that's what they need, and she did say that the shield did protect her more, because she held it up and said that did protect her more. So I would definitely support teachers wearing that to keep them safe. And I don't want the teachers, the one thing I saw on our fact sheet where it said, is under the health and safety, will students wear masks in classrooms? I would really like for parents to understand that we do expect them to train their children how to use the mask before they come back to school, because for the safety of our teachers and the other students, a teacher does not need to be manipulating the mask on 5 kids, because now she spread it from one to the other. So why social distance if she's going to be handling everyone's mask? And herself she's affected. But I don't think there's any research out there that will tell you that in a room like this with 20 children in there for 5 hours a day, that a mask or social distancing is going to protect them from an unseen cootie that's in the room. Because we try to keep them apart for lice, and lice does spread in the classroom, and we do everything to keep them apart. And I don't think this is really, any more, if this is far less of an achievable goal to do that. So I'd like for our notes to say that, so that the parents know that it's not safe for our teachers to be placing masks on elementary children and adjusting them. They've got work to do. And I don't know that the mask is just gonna flat work at elementary school. According to this paper that Dr. Gullett and I both read, 67,000 pediatricians don't believe it will. They just don't believe that's gonna work in small children. Children put their hands in their mouth and they pick their nose. It's just the way it is. We're not gonna send them to the bathroom and have little Johnny hit the toilet for the first time in his life in first grade at school. There's gonna be germs around. And so I would really like us to look at that, health and safety. Will students wear masks in the classroom? I don't want false expectations where the parents believe that the teacher's gonna be constantly putting that child's mask on him all day, especially when it's contaminating her every time she touches it, if he does have COVID, and that's not safe for her. So I do hear the teachers' pleas on that. So, you know, right off the bat, that's what I can think of. I had a little bit of another concern on one other topic that I wrote notes down. It's not so much my concern, but I did make a note. On the one, what will elementary specials schedules look like? And it talked about, you know, school sites will determine the manner in which instruction is delivered, and it goes on, at the very ending it says, in the traditional setting, we'll have procedures in place to support the health, safety, and wellness of students and staff. I would like to have as much as possible, because I don't think we can guarantee that we're gonna support, and I don't want anyone to misinterpret that. I believe it's very subjectively written, where it appears that we're gonna support the health, safety, and the wellness part's what kind of scares me, of students and staff, because we have no way of supporting the wellness. This is not in our hands, this is in God's hands, and I would like at the ending as much as possible, so that there's not unrealistic expectations put on our teachers. That a teacher should be blamed if a child comes home and says, oh, Johnny gave me a hug today, and then the parent says, I thought they were social distancing, my child got touched, and call the teacher. The teacher's just not going to be able to manage that. And I'm very concerned about the teacher's psyche, where we're asking her to do things that the parents can't even do themselves if the child's at home. So those are my concerns. It's right off the bat, and so that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Stacy. Ms. King.
Yeah, I understand the importance of children being back in school. I mean, that is, everyone that's in this room that has been in here is here for children. And I also understand the executive order that has been given to us by our governor. And he has told us, I mean, that we will have to have schools open 5 days a week. That is, we don't have a choice. That's not a school board decision. That is a state decision. I also heard Dr., was it Martinez?
Yes.
When he came in and he talked about children being asymptomatic. In most cases, that's true. The children are most of them probably will be asymptomatic. They may have a cold for a short time. My concern is for our employees, because it may not just be the sniffle, or they have it and then they recover well. And they will, like he said, he brought up, the community needs. They could go home to their grandparents, or cancer survivors, or elder, the list just goes on. And for every family and every person, it is a different scenario and different situation. I am here for the safety and the protection and the well-being of all our students and our employees. I understand what we have to do by law. So I would just like to tell our community that you need to do what's best for you. You need to do what's best for your children. You need to do what's best for you, and you need to do what's best for your family. And it's gonna look different in every situation and circumstance. And Dr. Gullett, I appreciate you having these crucial and critical conversations with us in this short amount of time. I was part of the committee. I know that they're in the short amount of time, they're planning as much as they can with the information that they know. We're not medical staff, we are education, but I do know we're having good conversation with our health department and stuff like that. So that's my message. And also, if we can just remember that our plan is flexible, it's fluid, it's constantly changing. Just because it was said today, tomorrow, it could be a whole different scenario. And I just ask that everyone please just remember to, just be flexible with this during this time. And if you have good ideas, share them. We want to know what they are. And that's where I stand with this today.
Thank you, Ms. King. Ms. Thor?
Yes, normally we have a work session and then we have a school board meeting. And so I agree and welcome Dr. Gullett, and I really appreciate you sharing with the community today that this is, by its nature of what we are all experiencing, a fluid plan. And I have received so many phone calls, so many emails. I've answered them all, I believe. So if I didn't get back to you, that was an oversight. I welcome, our form of government works really well when the community participates and is informed. So we really need you to keep doing this. And we were definitely in a time crunch, with the window of having a new superintendent come in, all the uniqueness that has entailed over the past few months. It was critical to get together with 130 people in 4 separate committees and try to get some guidance out there and some options out there as soon as we could. The community's been crying for that. And we couldn't release the survey until we had this meeting. And the survey, in my mind, is going to be critical because we need to find out how many parents and families are truly planning on sending their students back. And only then can we begin to plan for the numbers of teachers that we need. Ideally, every teacher that wants to come back and teach under brick and mortar, under the safest conditions that we can provide, will have that opportunity. And every teacher, like Ms. King said so perfectly, that if that modality doesn't fit for your particular situation and your family and what you have going on, then you will have the opportunity to bone up on your instructional delivery skills online and be able to make your contribution in that way. And so to me, it's always, when we get those executive orders, they always seem to come at the worst of times. And you feel like you've gotten some things in place and then boom, here comes another one. And that's sort of what happened, but I also think that the commissioner's executive order came at a good time because it emphasizes the utmost importance of public education as a linchpin to our society. And that's all fine and good, but that's only words unless they back it up. I've been reading about budget cuts, something that we already are contingency planning for. And if public education is truly the linchpin of our society during these really challenging times, then we need to be increasing, not decreasing support. And I think about the increased medical support that we're going to need at schools to really make them as safe as possible in the form of school nurses. This is the time to be bolstering the medical side because they're the ones that have the increased expertise. It's not a time to be cutting school social workers. We all know that kids have experienced trauma, families have experienced trauma, and for what social work assistance costs compared to what they provide, to me that's a no-brainer. And there's probably other positions too that we just really have to look very carefully at. If we are going to be continue to be a linchpin in our society, that we have got to provide the support that allows us to do it well and allows us to do it safely. And this type of support is going to be a lot less expensive in the long run versus having schools shut down again. Look what that's cost us, both financially and socially. And so we're already well aware of the toll that closing schools took on the community. But back in March, we were given no choice. We had to do it. But what I heard today was that we have choices. And to me, that's a good thing. It gives us the opportunity to work together. And as individuals, I think it's going to be really important not to lose sight of this golden opportunity to rethink, retool public education in Marion County. I think that from crisis can stimulate confidence and creativity, as well as provide a huge wake-up call, maybe for us as individuals, because now is the time to get ourselves as healthy as possible. And everyone that knows me knows I've been a big proponent of the mammograms and, doing what you can on the preventive side. But now it could really, truly save your life. It could truly save your life. The folks that, by and large, are going down from COVID-19 already have significant underlying health conditions that can be mitigated by making different lifestyle choices. So it is what it is. I have rededicated myself to trying to keep myself as healthy as possible because I'm going to walk the talk. I'm going to continue to visit my schools. I'm going to continue to champion the folks that are in the trenches every day. I heard the community is definitely divided about this, but that's nothing new. We all have our concerns. I think that the suggestion and talking about we need more testing, hopefully we can get drive-through testing at schools going. If healthcare providers have to be tested biweekly, then certainly we can do more to encourage our teachers to be able to be tested more often. Kids are resilient and they need our reassurance and they also need our role modeling of how to overcome adversity. Ms. Stacy mentioned the Hong Kong flu. There was the Spanish flu. There have been pandemics before that have affected schools. And in the old days, a lot of times there was a parent at home. So when schools were closed, there wasn't as much of an effect. But our society has evolved. So what worked back then becomes extraordinarily burdensome and overwhelming in today's society with the way things are. So I'm ready to, commit myself to the plan to return to school as a choice and commit myself to the ongoing problem solving and the basic health precautions, engaging in the basic health precautions really well and really consistently. I accept that challenge and I'm confident, that everyone will do all that they can do because the door is wide open with me as a school board member and I believe everyone else too. Together we'll get through this. We don't have all the answers today. We probably don't even know all the questions, but we have to have the conversation and we have to get started. And I'm ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thor. This, let me say this. We've been in a storm, a hurricane. We've been in a hurricane, Hurricane Corona. I'm gonna say it that way. We have been in Hurricane Corona since March. And instead of the winds of the hurricane lessening, they've gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. In the midst of a hurricane, you don't just give up. You don't just throw in the towel. You keep surviving. So what we're doing right now is surviving in the midst of a hurricane. Yesterday we got an emergency order. We keep saying executive order. It was an emergency order because obviously they recognize that education is an emergency. We don't know I don't know what has happened on the phone call today. Things could change drastically as soon as we walk out this room. We don't know. I haven't gotten an update. So we will find out what's going on. I heard a lot of stuff. I heard the plan. I heard speakers talking about vulnerable staff. I heard speakers talking about the vulnerable staff. I heard about children as carriers. I heard that there is a lack of concern by this board and the district for staff, and that there was a lack of support for staff. I heard several people mention about having a later start date in the month of August to comply and still be in compliance with the emergency order. Let me say this, when I heard the plan yesterday, presented to me yesterday, the complete plan presented to me yesterday, one of the things that I asked and that I got the answer on is that this plan could be amended or had the ability to be amended at any time. We do know that we have to approve something because we cannot continue to wait and get behind everybody in line that's trying to order all this stuff that we need to open schools safely. We have to do something, but we have to stay open enough to know that if we have to amend this plan, that we are ready and willing as a board, as a district, as a task force, ready to make these amendments to this plan. I heard something I needed a question. I had a question on when they talked about staff needing technology. Are staff going to get laptops, or are they going to get Chromebooks? Because I don't think you can do the same thing for a staff to do the same thing on a Chromebook as they can on a laptop. Those are serious things that I've gotten phone calls about. Another thing that I've heard, and I want to say this for the record, and I know she's putting in the notes, I want it in the notes. Nobody in this district should be shamed for wearing a mask or for not wearing a mask. It is their personal choice. If they decide to wear a mask, great. If they don't wear a mask, that's their choice. Because I've heard little things where people were kind of making fun of folk because they have on a mask. Well, that's their choice. That's their choice. It hasn't been mandated. If the governor had mandated that everybody wear a mask, then it wouldn't be a choice. But right now, I don't want our district to be one of those districts where because I wear a mask or because I don't wear a mask, I'm going to be shamed because of that. We do. All of us in here right now have on a mask. Obviously, we're thinking more about the person in the room beside us than we are about ourselves, because it keeps me from giving you something if I got it. So,
At least it helps.
Yeah, it helps. So we don't want anybody to be shamed into not doing wearing a mask. So let me say this too as a side note. When this survey goes out, because I know there's a community of people out that sometimes we don't address, but I want to make sure to address that this survey will be in Spanish as well, so that our Spanish community will be able to adequately do these surveys and be able to participate, because we need total participation. And I know Mr. Christian to make sure that stuff gets out there the correct way. I also heard something from one of the teachers that said this should not be political. From me and from my colleagues that I sit on the board with, I don't believe any decision, and from the task force people that worked on this, I don't believe anything that we have worked on has been political, partisan or not. It has been about safety for kids and safety for staff. And oftentimes we just say safety for kids. Staff, you have not been left out of this equation. If I was on the committee, I guarantee you I was speaking up for staff. Mr. Avery, we had different people. I prefaced this when we started this whole thing, that we had different people from different entities on these committees because we wanted to have proper representation. So staff, you have not been left out. As Ms. King said, this is going to be difficult. No plan. I read Duval's plan, I read Hillsborough's plan, I read Palm Beach's plan. I read Miami-Dade's plan. I read Lake County's plan. And no plan that I've read in the state of Florida is perfect. We know that because after the executive order came back, some of them had to go back and revamp. So there is no perfect plan for reopening. What's going to have to happen is that we're going to have a plan, and we're going to have to make it be flexible. That was the one word that Dr. Gullett gave me yesterday. It will be flexible. We will be able to make amendments to it as needed. We will be able to delete things or add things as needed. That's going to make us have a good plan. Parents, family members, teachers, staff, bus drivers, lunchroom ladies, custodians, you have to make a decision to do what's going to be best for you and your household. That sounds really tough, but nobody can put a price on your life. No one can put how valuable your life is to you. I heard the young lady said, what if she died and what's going to happen to her 20-month child? I heard all that. I heard everything. And those are things that we listen to and we've been listening to over and over and over and over again. If you decide to come to work, you should have available PPEs. You should have available those things to keep you safe. The things that you request should be given to you. And if they're not given to you, please call me and let me know. If you feel that unsafe, and we talked about this, Mr. Villanello and Dr. Gullett, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when staff had to return on the 6th. We talked about trying to have ways for staff to be able to come to work and function in a safe environment. That's always been our intention. We don't want the teachers to come back. We don't want anybody to come back and get sick. It's our goal for everybody to be safe. It's our goal for everyone to go home better than they did when they came in that morning. So, but the short-term thing is that we have to do something. If we have to do something because we don't want to be at the end of the line and find out that we can't get PPEs, we can't get hand sanitizing stations, we can't get face shields. We need to get in line at some point. And I think by the board approving the plan, which we know is not perfect, but it is a good plan. And there are some scary parts to it, but I encourage teachers, I encourage families, I encourage whomever to contact the task force members and give your concerns so that we can look at them. I promise you, we will look at them, and I promise you, if it's something that needs to be changed, we will amend it. If the start date is the biggest issue, then somebody, Bishop Stockton, y'all need to be talking to the task force. If hand sanitizers availability is the biggest issue, y'all need to be talking to the task force, and not just. We have to deal with the issues as they come. Let me say it that way. We have a new superintendent. We have a new administration. You have a board that's willing to listen. We got to do something. Kids, I'm Ms. McCall. I heard what you said. I've talked to people. Some of these kids, listen, we've had teen suicides. We had several suicides because these kids were home, and we don't know what's going on in their head. I've said this months ago that these kids are. This is a different group of kids because they have gone through something. And I know Ms. Stacy says that this happened in the late 60s with the Hong Kong flu. I wasn't born then. This is a different group of kids. This is a completely different group of kids. And their mental capacity and psyche is completely different. And we need to get them where we can lay eyes on them and try. I was so glad when they said that they need to have shields so that they could see the kid's face, because that was one of the concerns in the group that I worked in. I said, what happens when you have a kid that comes to school every day and he keeps his mask on all day, but when he goes home, he lifts it up and his lips are beat up because his parents have been beating him up or something. We never saw it because they had on a mask. So I was happy when she said a shield. There's a lot of things that we talked about in these task force. There's a lot of things that we talked about in these task force. So please, if there's things that you think we didn't talk about, bring them to the forefront so that we can address them. I know you guys, if your email looks like mine, you've been bombarded with emails, and yesterday for about an hour and a half straight, I got phone call after phone call after phone call from some people that present tonight. It's going to be some tough decisions. We're not callous to the needs of our staff. We're not callous to the needs of our parents. We just have to make some good decisions. We just have to move forward and try to start coming out of Hurricane Corona. How soon when we're coming out, I don't know. None of us know. The doctors don't know. The scientists don't know. But we got to still live. We still got to survive while we're in the midst of this storm. So I'm good with this plan, but I do want to note on the record that it is a plan that can be amended as needed. And we need to present what we need to present so that Ms. Boston Ellis them can start buying the things that they need to buy so that we can get our district, that we can be in good shape when things do open up. So, yes, ma'am, Ms. Dora.
Just whenever you reminded me of a couple things in your comments, and you always do such a great job of hearing everybody and remembering what everyone said, and it resonated with me about the 72-hour rule, you know, before kids can come back to school, and we know what sick eyes look like, and we also know parents dose them up and send them in, and you know, for all kinds of reasons, but the communication, the partnership and the communication at the school level is really what's going to make or break this. And what I mean by that is, if a student has to go home, it not only needs to be conveyed, you know, to the parent, but it also needs to be conveyed to the bus driver, because so many of our kids ride the bus. And me, having come from the school trenches, seeing kids show up on the bus the next day because the driver just wasn't informed not to even go by the house. It becomes more difficult if there's siblings that are coming out and are supposed to come, but the other one isn't. But, you know, everyone, as much as we possibly can, it has to get on the same page, you know, and this is what, again, when I emphasize a golden opportunity. When you have a crisis, you either crumble or step up. And I believe that we're going to be able to come up with all kinds of options to safely educate kids, to safely take care of our employees, minimize and mitigate as much risk as we possibly can, because it's that important. So I did want to comment on the sending sick kids to school, because that's always been an issue, and hopefully we can communicate across all the lines to make sure that if a kid needs to be home, they need to be home. And there were some suggestions that were made to me from different community members and teachers and so on. Someone that's obviously a horse person said, well, they have those big cooling fans, you know, in the horse barns and the shed rows. So if we don't want kids to be in enclosed spaces all day, but it's still hot out in Florida, maybe an investment in some of those big fans, if they can be safe enough to have on a campus, so that teachers can do a lesson outside for 20 minutes to get their kids out of the classroom and let that room circulate and air out. Just lots of cool ideas. And when people really start thinking from a problem-solving perspective, that's when we really begin to overcome these challenges. So again, I encourage everyone that's been reaching out to continue to do that and continue thinking. We'll get through it. I think about the buses. You know, we provide transportation. Most families really depend on it, but maybe there are some families that will choose, because it's easier to put them on the bus, but it's not that hard for them to bring them to school. Maybe start a little carpool, and then that way it's just a few kids traveling together, and that may make it easier for us to provide that safe social distancing on the buses. So I would encourage every citizen, and we all have a stake in this, we all pay our public education taxes, come up with, put on your thinking caps. It's amazing what solutions come from the community. The answers are usually in the room. People just need to be asked sometimes. So consider yourself asked.
Yes. And let me say this too, for clarity's sake. Just because someone sends us an idea don't mean that we're going to change it overnight either.
Right.
For clarity's sake, we will take into consideration. I try to answer my emails every morning, and so, but we will listen, and they will be duly noted. they will be duly noticed.
Now that we've had our
Yes, ma'am.
discussion. I was thinking about the comment about OSHA expects us to be safe here. You know, our employees should be safe. We shouldn't put them in, people work in nuclear power plants, but the employees are given the proper equipment to work in the nuclear power plant. We're giving our teachers what we believe will help them to be free from the virus as much as possible. And you spoke about Hurricane Corona. That's a great way to put it, because we may have Hurricane Corona days. We may have 5 days, Hurricane Corona days, and we're shut down. And then we come back. And maybe we have to redo them at the end of the year. We may be in school through this part of the summer next year because of Hurricane Corona days. So those things can happen. And the district might have to have hurricane days. And so that was a great way of putting it, because it kind of gets things in a little different perspective, you know? And as far as us getting killed and leaving our children behind, I actually looked at the percentages, I love percentages, of the chances of us walking out of here tonight and getting in a car wreck at our age, at this group's age. It's 30,000% higher chance of us walking out of here and getting killed by a car tonight than dying from COVID. That's the percentages. So, but one thing I have been pinged on my phone about my comments, teachers have pinged me, what I said about the elementary teachers. I got a ping from somebody I haven't spoken, you haven't even talked to about it. We have a lot to say today, and we're all seeing a lot of feel-good things, but I'm telling you, I am very concerned. This is something we can take action on. Our elementary teachers are not social distancing if they're in the child's face putting a mask on. We're asking her to do something that we don't want to do ourselves. These parents, I also have an article from an association of 67,000 pediatricians, the top organization for pediatricians, that says the same thing. We can't do it. It's not going to work with small children. And that's something that we're just not going to be able to be successful at. And to ask our teachers to do something that 67,000 pediatricians have put in a document that says is not an accomplishable goal for elementary age. Now, middle and high, yes, but for elementary. So I think there comes a time when we're sitting in this room, a paper has been written about this, and we do not need to expect the unaccomplishable goal from our teachers that these children in these elementary schools are either going to be social distancing or going to have on a mask. It isn't going to happen. We need to get to reality. It isn't going to happen, and we need to be honest about it. And I'm not going to shut up about this. Teachers do not need to be expected to be adjusting children's masks and then touching theirself. What if they have a parent that's getting chemotherapy?
I don't think we've asked that of our
But,
teachers.
well, we haven't said we're not, though.
But if we're
We
wearing
need to make it-
shields, the children can,
that's the whole
it's
idea for
very
shields.
different than a mask.
Right. Now, if we're using the shields in the elementary grade, that's maybe something that we do, but we haven't decided. It's been kind of like an option.
Well, no, the
So-
shields are
Yeah.
part of the plan,
That's why we
correct?
want to.
Only for elementary?
No, every
all
student will get.
Okay.
Every student.
Okay.
And-
Then I
and-
misunderstood
And it
that.
goes back to that piece where Mr. Whitehouse said, we have to educate and train. That education and training is not just for us at the school, it has to be also to a component with the parents.
Because I knew we were going to be providing both. I mean, I had a meeting yesterday, and I told we were going to be providing both. So if the teachers are going to, if everybody's going to have a shield, and that's what they're expected to wear, they're not going to be wearing masks then?
We can do PSAs, Kevin.
We can do a lot.
PSAs and stuff and put that stuff out there, tutorials, because we're gonna have to do, listen, we're gonna do PSAs, tutorials about what platforms they're gonna be using, we're gonna have to do a lot of things. So I understand this money that has to be spent. I understand it's money well spent, but we're gonna be doing a lot of different things.
So
to
you're
make sure.
telling me that there is no plan for students to wear masks? They're going to wear shields?
On the bus,
Right, they're gonna wear the shields, or every student is
Will be
going to be
given.
purchased a shield, and they're going to be provided mask.
Yep.
So,
Okay,
So on the
so-
bus, they will be wearing masks, but in the classrooms and at school, they'll have shields.
Is that
I-
right?
I will provide some clarification.
I
as
haven't
far as-
heard that.
I know. So we have masks in hand, and we are ordering shields. We do not have sufficient shields at this time, but the plan is to provide shields as well.
Right.
But provide shields as well. So
Yes.
in the schools, they will not be wearing masks. They will be wearing all
Some
shields.
kids might wear masks just
Some may
fine.
wear both.
All right, I get back to my, y'all are dancing around this.
No,
I don't
there's
want
no-
teachers,
I know exactly what you're saying.
I don't want teachers
You don't want it to be
putting masks
mandated. You don't
on
want teachers
children.
to be mandated to put masks on kids or adjust masks.
And I
right?
want that clear, and I want that in the records if y'all agree.
Well,
That we don't expect
We
teachers
never-
to touch
we have
them.
We have not said that any teacher had to adjust a mask. We haven't said they had to
You
adjust the
haven't said
shield.
they don't have to either, though.
Listen, I'm not gonna take that discretion away from a teacher. If that teacher decides to adjust a kid's mask, that'd be the
It's
teacher's
not social
decision.
distancing then.
That's up to that teacher.
Well,
Why would we're not mandating them to wear a mask? Why would we
Chairman, I call for the question.
well, let's just see how it goes.
We've heard our discussion. Are y'all ready to vote?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So all in favor for this, the approval of the reopening school task force, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Unanimous. Thank you. The next regular administrative briefing and work session is scheduled for July 16, 2020 at 9:00 a.m. The purpose of the work session is to discuss Osceola Middle School and North Marion High School cafeteria update, school planning update, 5-year work plan draft, and school stop times. The following administrative briefing and work session is scheduled for August 6, 2020 at 9:00 a.m. The purpose of this work session is to discuss budget, general fund, 1 of 3. Any final comments? Ms. Stacy? Any final comments?
No.
Or concerns? Ms. McCall?
I just want to, again, welcome Dr. Gullett. Thank you for your open line of communication since you've been here. It is very much welcomed. I also want to thank the Public Education Foundation and the CEP for hosting this morning's breakfast at Forest High School. For the administrators, it was very well done. Everybody was social distanced. It was very, very well done. So I wanted to be sure that I said thank you. And that's all.
Ms. King?
I also, again, would like to welcome Dr. Gullett to Marion County under these circumstances, and thank you for your transparency and communication as a board member. I appreciate that. I also want to thank the committee that worked very diligently on a short-term notice, collecting information, and they did a great job, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
I'm gonna jump from Mr. Elena.
I'm good, thank you.
Attorney Green?
Nothing, thank you.
Superintendent Gullett?
Thank you. So I want to finish with saying it is really an honor to be here. It really is. And I know it's challenging right now for the community, for our staff, the parents and families, but we will get through this. And I'm here to help facilitate two-way communication. We are committed to doing that and being fluid, as I said, but it is an honor to serve Marion County. So we will have a lot more conversation in the future. I did want to thank as well, we had a kickoff this morning, so the CEP and Public Ed Foundation for hosting some breakfast and some welcome for our school leaders. And we started those conversations today, and we are here and committed to supporting our folks in the field. They're in the front line with all of this and providing them training that's necessary, and hearing from them what they need. I told them today, I said, we need to hear from you. You need to let us know what you need, and we will adjust. We are agile, and we'll continue to do that. So we will provide much more of that in the future, but we're committed to serving them. So again, we're committed to two-way communication and supporting those staff members and all of our departments that support our students. So it's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Ms. Thor?
Yes, we, as a community, you know, we hear each other, we see each other, we support each other, and I too just want to welcome you again to Marion County, Dr. Gullett. We've got a lot on our plates, but I have no doubts that we are going to hit it out of the park, so welcome.
Again, we came together today for this meeting. The plan is not perfect, but it is a good plan. And I thank everybody that worked on these task forces. We have to move. I saw Pastor Howard and Bishop Stockton here. Thank you guys for coming out this evening, today, to address these concerns. And our new newspaper, the Ocala Gazette. So
Gazette?
glad to see them. Dr. Gullett, we are glad you're here. You jumped into the fire. You jumped straight into the fire. But I'm sure that we're going to come out of this refined. We'll come out of this refined. And I got challenged a couple weeks ago by a young lady from the NAAC Youth Council. I won't say her name because she knows who she is. But she challenged me. She said, you know, Reverend Cummings, I watched the school board meeting, but you're not wearing a mask. You're supposed to be setting an example for me. And that's why I'm wearing a mask. Because I took the challenge. This young lady was absolutely right. People are watching us as leaders, and we have to do what's right and what's best if we expect things to turn out right. So I thank all of my colleagues, my fellow board members. I encourage everybody to please be safe. We've had some, and let me say this too, we kids, parents, please keep these kids, keep an eye on these kids. We can't control everything that they do, but we had kids that possibly lost their eyesight this weekend over the holidays with fireworks and with guns, all those types of things. Those are reasons why we need to get these kids back in front of us. And so, as soon as possible and safely, as soon and as safe as possible. We can't just do it for speed, but it has to be with safety. So, again, thank you all for being here. There being no further business, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. King.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Thor. Meeting adjourned at 4:42 p.m.